Well, a warm welcome to the Development Control Committee meeting today on the 5th of March 2025. Before we begin the formal agenda, I would like to draw your attention to the following. Could I please ask that all phones are on silent, in airplane mode or switched off? And also just to note, the meeting will be live streamed on YouTube. So if any member of the public attending the meeting objects to being filmed, please advise us immediately and we will ensure that they are not included in the filming. Although I stress, the public gallery will not feature in the live stream and the public speakers will only be filmed from behind, where they are actually seated, and their faces will not be visible. So does anybody, apart from members of course, you have to be filmed, does anybody in the room object to being a feature on YouTube? Okay, thank you very much. I don't see anyone indicating that. And members, I keep saying this, I'm not sure it's necessary to explain in detail how to use the cue to speak function, but even based on previous council meetings, I know one or two struggle, so we'll bear with it, yes. And also members, just to remind you that there is an appeals update at the end of the meeting. So we'll move on now to the formal agenda. So Helen, may I have apologies for absence, please?
Chair, we have apologies from councillors Rachel Hurd and David Smith.
And can I see if there are any substitutes? Councillor Higgins.
Yes, I'm substituting for David Smith.
Thank you very much indeed. Next, we consider the minutes of the 5th of February 2025. Are there any corrections to the minutes? I couldn't spot any, to be fair. In that case, could I have a proposer? Councillor Whittam, and I'll take you as a seconder, Councillor London. Yes. So can I see a show of hands in favour of the minutes unamended and proposed by Councillor Whittam and seconded by Councillor London? Yeah.
Okay, that appears to be unanimous. Motion is carried and the minutes are accepted.
Thank you, Claire. There's no need to ask for anyone against or abstain, is there, to be fair? No, not really. Okay, declarations of interest. Members are reminded of their responsibility to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest, other registerable or non-registerable interests they have on any item. Yeah, I'm back. Shall I start that again, or should I just carry? No, just carry on. Interest in which they have in any item of business on the agenda no later than when the item is reached, and when appropriate to leave the meeting prior to discussion and voting on the item. So can I see if there are any? Councillor Whittam.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the first item, the Bridge Hotel, obviously I'm aware of being on Brandon Town Council. However, I am resigned long ago from the Brandon Town Council Planning Committee, so I feel I can approach this with an open mind from both sides.
Thank you, Councillor Whittam. Claire will comment on that.
Thank you, Councillor Whittam, for declaring that in the interest of openness and transparency. From what you've said, and provided you have an open mind, I don't see that precludes you from taking part in that application.
Thank you, Claire. On that note, we'll move straight on to item 5, and Amy is the presenting officer for the Bridge Hotel. Brandon, so please begin when you're ready, Amy.
Thank you. Good morning, committee. So here we have Bridge Hotel in Brandon. The application is for a single-storey overnight guest accommodation pod with covered decking, an associated footpath and landscaping, and then a single-storey rear extension to the hotel. It should be noted that the extension element is retrospective. The application was referred to delegation panel due to Councillor Savage's objection to the proposal, contrary to the officer recommendation of approval. Following the delegation panel meeting on the 28th of January, it was concluded that the application should be determined by Development Control Committee. Just a bit of housekeeping. Since the committee report was published, we have received comments from the Environment Agency. They have raised no objection to the proposal, but have advised that there will be a requirement for a flood risk activity permit for the development due to its proximity to the river, which would be included as an informative on the decision. We have also added an additional condition regarding foul drainage. So this condition would be added if the permission were to be granted, which requires details of the strategy for disposal of foul water on the site, and that would need to be submitted prior to the commencement of any development on the site. So moving on to the location. So we've got a location plan here that outlines the application site in red, and then the blue outline is the ownership line for the wider site. The application site is in the rear garden associated with Bridge Hotel in Brandon, and as you can see, it sits on the bank of the Little Ouse River. Here we have an area plan. So you can see that the site is within the housing settlement boundary. It's within the conservation area. We've got a public right-of-way which runs along that northern side of the site. We've got some listed buildings surrounding the site, but there are no listed buildings on the site. And then the blue line indicates the town centre boundary. And then just again, we've got the existing site plan. So at present, this is just land which has previously been used for storage. This is the car park, the existing car park for the site, and then we've got the hotel here. Within the blue line of the site, we have got a guest accommodation or a dwelling here, which is understood to be used as guest accommodation. And then I've got an aerial of the site here, so just showing its relationship to the countryside, the river, and the town to the south. And it should be noted that there are trees along this boundary and vegetation within the site, but none of the trees are protected by a tree preservation order, but they are, of course, protected by virtue of them being in the conservation area. Before I move on to the details of the proposed development, I would just like to acknowledge the neighbour and ward member concerns which have been raised during the application about existing lighting on the hotel, unauthorised development which may have taken place elsewhere on the site, as well as tree works which have taken place, and another planning application that we have for the site regarding a toilet block at the hotel. This application is for the proposed pod, associated development with the pod, and then the existing extension to the hotel only. So apart from the extension to the hotel, any unauthorised development which may require planning permission will not be considered during this presentation or under this application. But I am aware that West Suffolk's enforcement team have visited the site and will investigate any unauthorised development if there is any. So then moving on to the proposal. On here I have two site plans. We've got a superseded and then the revised, because there has been some changes during the course of the application. The initial submission was just for the pod, and then there was a proposed track and a parking area. And then during the course of the application, the parking area, the track have been removed, some soft landscaping has been added, and also the existing extension to the hotel has been included as well. Okay, so then just going back to the revised proposed site layout plan. So we have the pod, the access track, the landscaping, and the rear extension. In terms of the landscaping, we have received a landscaping plan. It's made up of new trees, some hedging, some wildflower, and some shrubbery. We have been advised it will be a mix of deciduous and evergreen. And we've also received the proposed lighting plan. So we've got 3 bollard lights proposed, and this shows that the lighting will be low level and will reach about 5 metres in range. Moving on to the floor plans for the pod element. So this is a 2-bedroom pod with a toilet, bathroom, and then we've got a kitchen and living area with the then covered deck. The pod would meet the definition of a caravan under the 1968 Caravan Act, with it comprising of 2 sections which will be assembled on site, and the agent has advised that it would be capable of being moved by road from one place to another. It has been confirmed by West Suffolk's building control team that as long as the pod meets the Caravan Act's definition of a caravan, it would not be classed as a building and therefore would not require building regulations. We've got the elevations of the pod here. The roof of the pod would be clad in timber shingle tiles. And then we've got some artist impressions here of the pod. So this is facing northwest, so from the opposite side of the river. And then this is looking kind of towards the pod, and then the hotel is up here. As previously advised, we have got the rear extension to the hotel as well. So I've got the existing hotel floor plans here and the existing hotel elevations. Although when I say existing, obviously they are, the extension has been built, but this is what was there before. And then we've got the hotel proposed floor plans here. So we've got the extension here. And then the extension here, which we'll see in some photographs now. This is the front of the hotel. So looking from the high street to the front of the hotel, and then the entrance is just here to the car park. This is the extension which forms part of this application. Again, this is the extension. And here I'm stood on the bridge looking towards the application site for the pod. So the pod would sit roughly around here. And we've got the neighbouring properties on the opposite side of the river. This is, the pod would sit just behind these shrubs, and this tree is to be retained. And then I'm stood roughly where the pod is proposed to be placed. Looking across to the neighbouring properties here. And then back towards the hotel. And just looking towards Evelyn Cottage, which is the one which was in the blue line. So I'm now just going to move on to some of the considerations for the application. So DM2 of the Joint Development Management Policies document seeks to ensure that development does not have a detrimental impact on residential amenity nor the amenities of the wider area, and DM14 looks to minimise pollution, including light and noise resulting from developments. Concerns have been raised by residents regarding potential noise impacts as a result of the proposal, overlooking and loss of privacy into their properties, as well as light pollution. The elevations that I have shown you do show that the open element of the pod would be facing southwest, which would be directed towards the river, not directly looking towards the properties on the opposite side of the river. The southwest elevation, which is the one that you can see here, which faces towards the neighbouring properties, would be solid with no windows. Guests of the pod could, of course, sit outside of the covered area, but this could be done at present in association with the hotel, say if picnic benches were placed on that piece of land. In terms of lighting, as was shown on a previous slide, the light spill from the proposed lighting is minimal, and also further lighting would be restricted via condition if permission were to be granted. We would also place a requirement for the submission of a site management plan via condition, along with a condition which would prohibit campfires and barbecues in this area to reduce impact on neighbouring amenity. And in addition, the Environmental Health Officer from West Suffolk is satisfied with the proposal. Objections were raised by residents regarding the loss of a view. However, this is not a material consideration. So therefore, noting the orientation of the building, the scale of the building, and the limitations that could be put on the permission, officers do believe that the application is acceptable in terms of the amenity of residents. I'll now just touch on heritage and impact on the character of the area as well as the design of the pod. So local and national policies do require proposals to respect the character and appearance of the immediate and surrounding area, including conserving the conservation area and public right-of-ways. And paragraph 215 of the National Planning Policy Framework states that where development proposals will lead to less than substantial harm to the significance of a designated heritage asset, such as a conservation area, this harm should be weighed against the public benefits of the proposal. So the rear extension element of the proposal is considered to be acceptable. It's modest, whilst it doesn't use materials which are used on the existing hotel. It is tucked away and can't really be seen from the high street, and you'd only see it in passing views up the river. In terms of the pod element, our conservation officer was consulted and did advise that this would sit on the lower end of the less than substantial harm. So we would need to weigh up what benefits there are to the proposal and whether they outweigh the harm to the conservation area. But with the combination of the landscaping that is proposed, as well as the external materials, those timber shingles, which would soften the appearance in the landscape and reduce any urbanising impacts, as well as the views of the pod when going up the river being kind of brief, officers do consider that the proposal does have public benefit which would outweigh the harm to the conservation area. Concerns have been raised by residents about the impact of the proposal on trees, as well as the landscape. Again, local and national policy looks to conserve and enhance valued landscapes. This revised proposal, without the parking and without the access for a vehicle, is considered now to only encroach marginally on the root protection area of that large tree that you saw on site. We would require the submission of an arboricultural method statement via condition, and also the proposed landscaping plan would be conditioned, and this includes, as I said before, a variety of native species, including evergreen and deciduous trees, which would ensure some screening all year round. And we would require a soft landscaping scheme, the implementation of soft landscaping and a retention and management condition for the landscaping if the application were to be approved. Ecology is another area where residents have raised concerns. Local and national policy does require that we assess the proposal in terms of protecting priority species and that we ensure there are mitigation and enhancement measures for biodiversity when considering developments. An ecological impact assessment was submitted to support the application, and new trees, wildlife friendly planting, we've got a bat box and new bird boxes are proposed to be installed. Place Services Ecology Officer was consulted on the application, and they did advise that they are satisfied with the mitigation and enhancement measures, and these would be controlled via condition. In addition, with the proposal sitting on the river, there's likelihood that bats are in the area. So we would also control external lighting via condition to ensure a minimal impact on the protected species. In terms of highways, we are satisfied there is sufficient on-site parking. Cycle parking would be required via condition, as well as EV charging infrastructure. The application site is in a sustainable location within walking distance to the town centre as well, so that does meet the requirements of policy. With the application site sitting on the bank of the river, it is close to flood zone 2 and 3, but the application site itself is actually within flood zone 1. We have received no objection comments from the Environment Agency, and we would place an informative for a flood risk activity permit as is required by the Environmental Permitted Regulations 2016, which would be added to the decision. And then moving on to the tourism and economic benefits of the proposal. So improvements to tourist facilities such as this hotel are supported in policy DM34 and CS6 of the local development plan. The application site is well connected within walking distance of the town and local amenities. The design of the pod is considered to be acceptable. There is sufficient on-site parking, as I said before, and this proposal would allow for the expansion of the existing business and would also encourage visitors to spend locally within Brandon. I just want to touch upon the comments that were received from Brandon Town Council and Councillor Savage. So during the first round of consultation with the parking area and the access track, Brandon Town Council did object to the proposal. However, following the amendments and a subsequent consultation, they provided comments of support to the proposal. Councillor Savage, who will speak today, has objected during both the first and second round of consultation, with concerns raised in line with residents' comments. And then just moving on to the summary. So whilst the concerns raised by residents and the ward member are noted, there would be economic and social benefits from the proposal which would weigh in favour of the scheme. There is a low level of harm to the conservation area which does weigh against the scheme. However, the public benefits of the proposed development are considered to outweigh this harm. The site is located in a sustainable location and would contribute to the local economy. The existing parking arrangements are sufficient, and any urbanising effects from the proposed built form on this edge of town location would be mitigated by existing landscaping and additional soft landscaping. Therefore, the proposal would result in a modest degree of conflict with the relevant local and national policies in terms of its impact on the conservation area, but noting the public benefit of the proposal, the officer recommendation is one of approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Amy. We have got 3 registered speakers, committee. Wayne Bland, he's a neighbouring objector speaking on behalf of himself, Emma Bland, Una Smith, Terry Nolan and Michael Finch. We've got Councillor Jules Holland. Welcome, Councillor Jules Holland. Shall I start that again? Yeah. Councillor Jules Savage. and we've got Matt Arnold. Wayne, you've got 3 minutes from the first time we hear you speak. Thank you very much.
Site falls within Brandon's designated heritage asset and a conservation area of Brandon's important view. The site has been subject to intentional.
Wayne, is it? I don't think your mic. I don't. Just leave it. It'll come as soon as it goes red. That's better.
Way to go.
Yeah, start again.
The site has been subject to intentional unauthorised development by the Arnolds for well over 2 years, and as such I'm astounded by the presentation we have just witnessed and that the officers have ignored same and recommended approval. We are of the opinion that this is officer incompetence, corruption or both. Intentional unauthorised development was introduced to stop exactly this kind of pre-application development. This is not simply about an accommodation unit, a path and an extension built without planning permission, as the presentation implies. It's about the development as a whole, as it's intentional unauthorised development within a conservation area and heritage asset. And if the officers were prepared to do their jobs and do even a small modicum of due diligence, they would not be recommending any of the 3 applications related to this site for approval, one of which they have already approved, and the owner of the trees and the land it relates to gives no permission to touch same. The plan is based on misinformation and said owner will not allow trespass or action will be taken. Where are the photos and the video that Councillor Savage was asked by the delegation committee to forward to the officers that show the conservation area in its splendour before the work was started, that show the work being carried out and the garish, tacky light show? As planning officers, you well know that anything that materially alters the appearance and character of a conservation area requires planning permission, such as cladding walls, constructing extensions, adding detached ancillary buildings or sheds, and conducting surfacing and groundworks or tree works, all of which have been carried out at the Bridge Hotel. Where's the heritage statement that's required before developing within a conservation area? Furthermore, awnings, canopies, shutters and external lighting have been installed, all of which are in contravention of planning policy DM17, and none of the works pass the test of paragraph 208. All this has been carried out without permission. Many of the consultees have added conditions, some of which may be insurmountable or need further planning permission. These are fundamentals of the Planning Act and NPPF, all of which appears the officers are prepared to ignore, along with about 70 objections. Parliament has been concerned about the harm caused where development has been undertaken in advance of obtaining planning permission, as it gives no opportunity to limit or mitigate the harm that has already taken place, and for this reason a planning policy to make intentional unauthorised development a material consideration that will be weighed in the determination of all planning applications and in appeals was introduced. This policy also includes a mechanism to claim back all costs from the applicant relating to an appeal if the decision is upheld in relation to intentional unauthorised development. The Arnolds told us when first challenged that they were connected and that no matter what they do, they'll always get what they want, and they have a guardian angel that will make sure of it. Committee members...
Wayne, you've reached your 3 minutes. Have you got one sentence you can finish on? Not a paragraph, a sentence, please.
I have...
No, it's okay. Don't worry. We'll draw a line under it there. Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Jules, you've got your 3 minutes, Jules.
Right, am I on red? Yes, I am. Thank you, Chairman, and good morning. As District Councillor for Central Ward, the ward in which this development has and is taking place, I am in full support of the residents and have objected to this application and wholeheartedly agree with their comments. The site has been subject to international unauthorised development for well over 2 years now, all of which has been leading up to this application, and I am surprised that the planning and enforcement officers have failed to recognise this, particularly as this underhand way of developing a site without permission limits consultee comments, results in misleading surveys and prevents anyone affected from commenting because of this underhand tactic to force through inappropriate development. The Chief Planner has stated that intentional unauthorised development is to be a material consideration in the determination of all planning applications. There is no requirement for this lodge in Brandon, let alone within our heritage asset. There are 4 hotels within a 50-yard radius of the site. Furthermore, Centre Parks, which offers 400 acres of countryside and nearly 1,400 lodges that cater for 4,500 people, is only 5 miles away. There are also a further 9 sites offering similar accommodation in close proximity to Brandon. The applicants claim that this single lodge will bring employment and nearly £90,000 worth of additional business to the high street businesses each year. This is simply unrealistic fiction. The Lodge Inn is self-contained, and the applicant will no doubt be encouraging its occupants to use the cafe and facilities on site to ring-fence any revenue for themselves. I have recently been made aware of application DC 241836 CLP to permanently situate a shipping container in the centre of the Bridge Hotel site, directly under a mature willow tree. The container is converted into a toilet block and will simply add to the totally unacceptable ruination of Brandon's conservation area and the heritage asset. It will be in clear line of sight within our important view as depicted on Brandon's conservation area appraisal resubmission of the application we are considering now. The applicant has chosen not to do this and instead go down the lawful development route, another example of the underhand tactics used by the applicant to mislead and limit response or comment. I've lived in Brandon for over 25 years and absolutely love it. I frequently use the towpath going...
Jules, I'm sorry to interrupt, but that's
Right.
yours. Have you got one set? I'll give you...
I certainly have.
As long as you go straight to it.
Yes. As such, I strongly object to item A. I have no objections to item B and objections to C of this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Right, we turn our attention now to the... I don't know why the mic... My apologies. Matt, please, you've got 3 minutes.
Got one. Thank you, Chair. We're a proud family who came to the town in 1980 when my father retired from his RAF career, which saw him decorated for saving lives at sea in the yellow RAF whirlwinds of the time. I mention this only because we have not one but 2 former military officers, because I also flew in the Royal Navy, behind this application, and we're not used, either of us, to having our word doubted in the way that has too often been the case here. The laundry room element was included in the application by way of making up for erroneous advice from West Suffolk given to us earlier in writing that planning for the laundry would not be required. So thank you very much, Amy, for your wonderful climb down on that. We accepted it in good faith and we put the application for the laundry in with the pod application. That's the only reason why that's there. Many of the public objections, as we've just heard, are related to other works we've carried out at the hotel and have absolutely nothing to do with this application. While some of the consultees have recommended conditions to approval, which we back, the only statutory consultee objecting was the landscape officer due to the conservation, and as has been covered by Amy already, we've duly revised the proposal in response to these comments to screen the pod from the important view from the bridge, and we've taken great trouble to source the right kind of mixed deciduous and evergreen trees and hedges and shrub coverage that will, when mature, completely hide the pod entirely from the road, in my opinion. Summarising then, the councillor's objection is focused on the other works to the hotel external areas rather than the planning application in question. a whole stack of no comments and nothing to add. Natural England, no comment, general advice only. Highways, MOD, arboricultural officer, ecology officer, private sector housing, environmental health team, environment team, water officer, public right-of-way team, SSE minerals and waste team, all no objection. Brandon Town Council supports the application. Thank you to them. And before I finish, I'll briefly outline why I think that is. And that's because the hotel benefits the town's economy hugely, and the opening up of our gorgeous riverside gardens, totally free to picnicking members of the public, is hugely appreciated. We have the Rotary summer barbecues, we have Mark Skinner's funerals having their wakes there with us, and hundreds of people enjoying the cafe in the summertime. When we actually started this project in 2014 to clear it all up, that's when we refurbished the hotel. The initial turnover was £80,000 and I had 3 part-time staff. Today, the turnover is approaching £500,000. I've employed 13 local people in the economy, and last year's wages, they cleared £180,000 between them. So never mind a single pound that the tourists are spending in the town, which is loads, our own staff are doing it too, and we're increasing that way, as we have every right to do as a business. Because we already allow Brandon people to enjoy our gardens, and completely free of charge if they choose, then the changeover on pod days when there's no customers at all, there's an extra space for the town to come and enjoy. I mean, we just think it's a win-win.
Again, you've reached your 3 minutes.
No, that's fine.
Okay.
Thanks very much, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Right, members, time for the committee to debate this application. Again, slightly mixed up here. I think Councillor Whittam, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah. One thing. Has been raised that the applicant had said he had a guardian angel in the planning department and can get away with doing what he wants. Now that raises big alarm bells for me and should do for every member of this.
Councillor Whittam, I'm not sure the applicant actually said that, to be fair, did he? Did he? Wayne, it's not your turn. You've had your turn.
But it is documented within the pack under the objections. Now, I'd like to ask, has this been investigated? And if not, why not? Because it does raise alarm bells for me.
Okay. Councillor Chester, please.
Thank you, Chair. Are we live? Yeah, just to remind councillors, we are dealing with the application before us, and any unauthorised work is actually currently being dealt with by this council. Along with that, I'm erring on the side of approve this application in line with the officer recommendation. I'm not prepared to make an offer of proposal, but I'd like to hear the debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chester. Councillor Glossop, please.
Thank you, Chair. I went on the site visit. I'd like to know how many months of the year would this pod be used, so that would have a bearing on, because there's been talk about light, where you'd need light if they're going to be used in the winter, wouldn't you, walking down to them? So if that can be answered, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Glossop. Councillor Bull, please. Well done, Councillor Bull.
I actually did the effort to touch it. I think it's important we do dissociate the two things. There are clearly a lot of enforcement issues there, but this application is quite separate and has to be considered in that light. The other matters will be dealt with separately. And I just have a couple of questions. I'm not quite sure what a flood risk activity permit does. And if it doesn't require building regulations, how is there any checks on the water and the waste and things like that? And I also think the barbecue restriction, which is being proposed as a condition, seems to me unenforceable, because the hotel itself, on land very close to that, could have a barbecue, I presume, and the land actually does belong to the hotel. So I just think that's a thing that may be unenforceable. But I'd be interested to listen to the debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bull. Councillor Holder, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just waiting for the blinking to stop. Yes, I too went on the site visit, and what a lovely day it was to go on a site visit. I've never been behind the bridge house or actually been able to see the river. I've gone through Brandon so many times, and you go over the bridge, you can't see the river. It was really nice to actually see it, even though spring hasn't really sprung yet. I'm amazed. Actually, let me start. Excellent presentation from our officer, and a lot of extras that we didn't know about came out of that. Interesting to hear the different points of view and a bit of the history of the hotel. I take the applicant's point about all the consultees and the fact that the West Suffolk have to apply to these consultees for their feedback and wait. And I mean, that's probably extended the application significantly. Sometimes think we've got too many consultees, but they've all got to have their say. And to the most part, they've all said there's no objections to it. The town council, obviously quite important body within the town, have no objections to it. The only objection I'd have to it is a mechanical swan park next to it, which actually does detract from the whole ambience of the place. And Councillor Ball said about barbecues. When we were looking over the river where the pod was going to go, could clearly see a big red barbecue in the adjoining garden. So, barbecue is, in the summer, obviously, is something that lots of pubs and restaurants and hotels embark in. So I think it is a condition that doesn't need, I think it probably is being unworkable. However, the application goes on with all the recommendations that have come through, and there's a huge amount of detail within the conditions. I think it's an excellent report that we've all got, and it's great to hear the different sides of the stories. But I'm not reluctant to recommend approval of this application if I can find a seconder. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holder. Can I see if there's a seconder, please? Councillor Waldron, would you like to speak at this point?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah. I was on the site visit. The piece of land that they're proposing to put this on is semi-derelict, so it can only be an improvement with planting and so on. And with the correct conditions, which I feel have been put forward, I don't see a problem with it. So I'm quite happy to second the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holder. Sorry, Councillor Waldron. At least I didn't call you Jules Holland. Councillor Neil, please.
Thank you, Chair. I didn't go on the site visit, so perhaps people can enlighten me. Is there mooring for boats along this riverbank? Because that in itself is obviously bringing revenue to the hotel. I don't see that one of these pods is going to create an awful lot more employment other than another task for a cleaner to do. So I don't see it bringing economic value to from an employment point of view. Obviously,
Andy, sorry, we've lost your mic.
Yeah, I wanted to speak.
Should we turn yours off?
Turn on.
Mark, how are we getting on? Okay. Yeah, you're back, Andy.
Okay. I don't see it creating great employment opportunity, as I say, possibly only needing a cleaner if that's not done by the current cleaning staff. They're a self-contained unit, so it's a bag of shopping up the town for anyone who stays there, or, as has already been pointed out, possibly using the hotel's facilities, which I'm sure that would be encouraged. So from an economic point of view, I don't see it's going to transform Brandon in any way, shape or form. The planting of the trees, how long are they going to take to mature, to obscure this? It's all very well saying it could be years and years before these trees are able to screen off this pod. I'm listening to the ward member, and I'm listening to the objections from the public who live in Brandon, who have got to live with this. I really don't see that it brings a great deal to the town. The fact that there's I don't like to see retrospective planning coming to the committee as well. So I'm still open-minded, but I'm edging towards refusal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Neal. Before we take, and I understand Councillor Whittam wants to speak, and I've got Councillor Higgins, but I'm going to go to officers to try and bring us up to date in terms of what their answers are to questions and issues that have been raised.
Hello. Right, I'm going to try and go through these in order. I'll go Councillor Glossop first. She had a query about the months of operation. So we wouldn't be controlling the months of operation, so it could operate all year round. There is a restriction on, I think we might have, where is it? I think it's condition 7, which restricts the length of time someone could stay in the pod for, but that's it. In terms of lighting, the lighting plan has been shown, and it has 3 bollard lightings, which are about 40 centimetres off the ground. So that is what would light the path from the car park to the pod, and then we would restrict any other lighting. So if any other lighting was proposed, it would need to be applied for. Okay, and then Councillor Bull. So a flood risk activity permit, it's not a planning requirement. It's part of the, I can't remember what it's called now, Environmental Act, yeah. So they would have to apply to the Environment Agency for that, and we would just put an informative on to advise that they need to apply for that, and that is due to the proximity to the river, but it is separate from planning. But they would need to apply for that prior to any of the works taking place. In terms of wastewater, we would add a foul water condition on, which we would request details of a foul water strategy. We did actually have a drainage plan on the original submission, but with the update to the plans, we didn't receive a new one, so it should be quite easy to resolve. In terms of the barbecue and campfire restriction, that was really to discourage people from sitting outside at a campfire into the kind of early hours, basically. In terms of whether it's enforceable, we have placed it on other permissions before, but I'm happy to run it past our enforcement officer to check that they are satisfied that it could be enforceable. I think that was all of your queries, and Councillor Holder, I think that then answers your query about the barbecue as well.
And then about the planting, Councillor.
Oh, yeah. Then Councillor Neal, yes, there is a mooring already there. And in terms of the planting, we would require details of the size of the planting. We would want a mix so that from the start there would be some screening, but there is already some shrubbery there, so there would be some screening almost straight away. And also the pod, it would be clad in timber shingle tiles. So that is also a material which we think would make the pod kind of fit in with the landscape of the area. I think that was all of your queries. Is there anything else?
Yeah, and if I may, I would just like to go back to the very first question from Councillor Whittam, which I think alluded to some of the allegations regarding the conduct of officers in relation to this application. I've not received any such complaint, and I'd have to say that obviously clearly would be a very serious matter. I think that is something entirely separate to the debate today. Your officers have produced a report on this scheme, which is purely based on our development plan policies, the national policies and the relevant planning matters. But I would reiterate clearly, if we did receive such a complaint about those concerns, they would of course be investigated, as it is an incredibly serious matter. Thank you.
Thank you for that last point, Penny. Right. You're not on my screen, but you were wanting to speak, Councillor Whittam.
I'm read already. Thank you. Screening and soft landscaping to hide this thing. When last we looked at a pod or pods, I think it was in Wickham Brook, the requirement was that they could not be seen by the neighbours and the pods could not be seen, and the pods could not see the neighbours. That was the idea. Here it's going to be stuck out like a carbuncle. It's 12 metres long. That is 39 foot 4.4 inches. It's a monster. It's going to be seen from every angle and it will see everybody on the other side of the river. And I fully take on board what the Councillor Savage and Mr Bland have said, that it will destroy their amenity. And there's that to it. Lighting was mentioned. The lighting that has already been installed, and I have seen it, would rival Blackpool. Literally rival Blackpool. It's all LEDs and totally inappropriate for a conservation area, and it's all part of this intentional unauthorised development that has been going on for a long time. Ecology and Conservation Officer, they have come and looked at the site after all these alterations have been made. So they're not giving a fair representation of what it was like. And I do understand that there were photographs, because it was mentioned at delegation panel, and they have not been produced to show what the site was like before all this intentional unauthorised development started. Trees and associated development for the pod. There were a lot of mature trees on that site, and they have all been felled without permission in the middle of a conservation area, simply to make space for this pod. And as I say, at 39 foot 4 inches, it is a monster. It is going to be visible from everywhere you look. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whittam. Councillor Higgins, please. Wait for it to go red. That's it, you're on.
I'm sorry. My question was about the so-called unauthorised development. I noticed that there is a retrospective planning issue on this. That's not unusual. When I've sat on other planning committees, that has come up before, and usually the guidance is, yes, enforcement has to take place, but your job is to say, if that hadn't been built, would you have given permission for it to be built? And I haven't been to the site, so my apologies, but I have looked at the photograph there. It appears to be completely tucked into a natural place for an extension. So on that particular issue, I don't see any particular objections with that as a retrospective planning issue. I'm not aware of any other retrospective planning that's come a part of this, although that people keep referring to lots of different things that have happened.
Yes, there has been a lot of reference to previous history of the site, but it is just the pod and that small retrospective addition. Councillor Mildmay White, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Sadly, I couldn't go on the site visit either, but looking at the pictures that were on the website from the original application, the site had obviously been cleared prior to the site visit, I assume. So, I mean, that is a consideration, I think. Should there have been an application to fell trees there? I don't know what trees were there because obviously the site is cleared. But we are where we are. And to me, this is a valuable economic resource for the town, having a hotel like this in a most attractive setting from the pictures I can see with the river at the back there. And to me, that a pod would fit quite well. It was obviously land that wasn't being used for anything else. The hotel would be well within their rights to have some kind of amenity there, parties, barbecues, whatever, which I don't think are conditioned as part of the hotel occupation anyway. So to me, yes, the pod is big. I personally don't like decking, and the decking is quite large, but this is the application before us, so I have to accept that. The lighting has come back as much lower lighting than was there before, and without the car parking. This, I think, could sit quite well within the landscape. I think from the point of view of noise, there will have to be, and the condition should say, no loud music or anything. But again, I'm assuming if there were parties at the hotel, people could have spilled out onto that land and continued partying down there anyway. So I would vote in favour of this application because I think it will be an enhancement to the hotel, which is obviously being run quite well and bringing benefit to the town. The comments on TripAdvisor and things about the hotel are very positive. When it comes to the extension that is the retrospective, personally, I think it sits particularly badly with the hotel. That cladding is hideous and doesn't seem to fit in at all. So I would vote against the application for the retrospective planning application because I think it needs further attention to actually be in keeping with the hotel. But I would vote in favour of the pod. Thank you, Chairman.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Marmae-White. I don't think we've got a choice, have we, on that particular item, but I'll let officers come back on that. Councillor Neil again.
We're up and running. Thank you, Chair. Just listening to the conversations that have gone on and all the very valid points made by everybody. But it seems to be that we're accepting that this is going to be a space that's going to be used for barbecues, for parties. It's an extension of the entertainment area in the summer for the hotel. If we're going to accept all of that, then sticking a bat box up doesn't make it all right, as far as I'm concerned. And, you know, that's the only provision we seem to be making here is we're going to put a bat box up and that makes everything okay. I don't accept that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Neil. I've got no other members currently indicating they wish to speak, so can we come back on these points, please? When you're ready.
Okay, so I think we only really had one question, and that was Councillor Marmae-White. In terms of the tree loss, our tree officer has visited the site and he was happy with what had happened, but we have also had a number of tree applications, which is in paragraph 11 of my report, which details the relevant planning history. So we had 2 in 2013, 1 in 2023, and 1 in 2024. And yes, so they were happy with what works were being proposed, and they obviously visited the site and saw what works had happened on the site. And then in terms of the extension element, we do have to consider the application as a whole, so we couldn't divide that one out.
Okay. And then just in relation to Councillor Neil's point about the back box, the requirement for that is a sort of specific biodiversity enhancement. So it's not sort of the rationale in terms of weighing out any harm. That was a separate exercise that Amy did in terms of the conservation area. So it is a requirement, but it's in relation to a narrow kind of ecology and biodiversity point, that particular element.
Thank you, Penny. Well, that certainly stimulated some interest. Councillor Waldron, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just casting my mind back to the site visit. As we walk towards the area proposed, which I accept, we pass between two buildings, and there is a gas. I assume it's a gas tank under the ground there. Are they going to move that, or are they going to leave it? Because it's not really great if you're going to have barbecues, is it? On top. I just wondered, and could somebody clarify if it is actually a gas tank or something else? That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Waldron. Councillor Mildmay White, please.
I just had one question, hasn't been addressed at all. Are there any views from the footpath that runs adjacent to the site? We didn't see anything or hear anything about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mildmay White. Councillor Miller-Jones.
Thank you. Yeah, just on this sort of the trees again. I had a bit of a question about the root protection area. I noticed that the conditions talk about needing details of what's going to happen, but that doesn't. I just wonder, sort of, does that mean they can do anything to the roots as long as they give details? I don't find that very clear. Also, just on when the conditions are talking about if any further trees are removed, it says that any trees have to be replaced by a similar sort of size and type of tree. But the trees that have already been removed, are we being told that it's just absolutely fine that those trees have just gone and that nothing is put in their place? I would assume that those trees that have already been removed would also be conditioned to be replaced. So I just wanted to clarify that, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miller-Jones. Okay, officers, over to you.
I'm just going to go back to Councillor Miller-Jones first, because that's in my mind. In terms of the root protection area, so the tree officer from Place Services who was consulted was happy that there was a minimal encroachment onto the root protection area, and that was only by the footpath. The condition in terms of the arboricultural method statement, an arboricultural method statement would need to be submitted, but then we would have to review whether it's acceptable. So it wouldn't just be they have to submit one and that's done. So we would review it, and if it is acceptable, then we'd discharge the condition. If not, then we'd ask for different details, further details. In terms of the trees to be replaced, those that have been removed will have been assessed by our tree officer, and if they felt that they needed to be replaced, then he would have said that. The condition that you're talking about that requires the replacement of trees is purely from basically this application. If this is granted, if any trees are to be removed, then they would be replaced. Hopefully that's answered your question. Councillor Mildmay White, your question about the views from the footpath, there would be some views from the footpath because it runs adjacent to the application site, but there is some vegetation on there, but we have concluded that it is acceptable, any views from the footpath. And then, yes, so I'm just going to ask you a question about.
It was just picking up on the point of the gas tank, or a sort of allusion to the gas tank. I can't confirm, or Amy can't confirm specifically what that is, because it's not details that we've got before us in this application. It's not necessarily a planning matter in terms of if there's any other storage of things on the site that may need to be moved or addressed through separate legislation. But certainly we don't have any plans before us that detail anything of that nature or anything of that nature being removed.
Thank you, officers. So I think we've had the final officer response based on the questions so far from members. There's nobody indicating they wish to speak. So let's just test where the committee is. Councillor Holder has proposed approval. and that has been seconded by Councillor Waldron, and that's in line with the officer's recommendation for approval. Can I see a show of hands in favour of approval of the application, please? Keep your hands up, members. And those against, please? And abstentions? 1. Yeah.
So that is 12 votes in favour, 2 votes against and 1 abstention. The motion is carried and the application is approved.
Thank you, members. Thank you, Claire. Is there any need for a comfort break? Yes, I've been asked for a comfort break, so let's give it 5 minutes. So back here on my watch at 10 past. Thank you.
He's over there.
Councillor Whittam. Thank you very much indeed. There's no need to run. We don't need to fall. That's okay. Okay, we move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the land south of Cavendish Road in Clare. And Dave. Okay. That's okay. Thanks. Thank you, Councillor Higgins. Yes, so it's over to Dave then to make a presentation. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. This is an application for up to 70 dwellings and a 30-space car park. The proposal is submitted in outline form with all matters reserved apart from the primary pedestrian and vehicular accesses off Cavendish Road itself. It is before the Development Control Committee as technically it is a departure in that it is contrary to the current adopted local plan. Just like before I start the presentation proper, just to draw members' attention to the late paper, which reports comments from Clare Town Council, Suffolk County Councillor Bobby Bennett, who I note is here to address you this morning, and also from Natural England itself. I just wanted one brief point of clarification in relation to the Clare Town Council comments, which you will have seen in the late paper. The suggestion that in those comments that Suffolk County Council as local highway authority has given erroneous advice, that's a quote I take from the Clare Town Council representation, is not actually the case. The County Council advice, the highway authority advice has always been that this is an HGV route, and that is the case as the A1092 is designated by the County Council. I do beg your pardon, sorry, I hope everyone can hear me. As a local access lorry route, there has been no suggestion by the highway authority at any point that the A1092 is a strategic lorry route. So Suffolk County Council as local highway authority has confirmed that this advice remains robust. Members also note, please, that there have been a number of generally inconsequential typographical and other revisions to some of the conditions. They are otherwise as set out as revised within the late paper before you today. So I'm just going to talk you through the plans. A number of you were on site with me on Monday morning. For those that weren't or otherwise not familiar, the site is shown in red on the screen behind us. Generally a rectangular site situated south of Cavendish Road, immediately to the south and east of the settlement boundary within Clare. Bounded to the east, as we can see on this plan, by the concrete access track that provides vehicular access to the Anglian Water wastewater treatment works off to the south and east of the site, and to the southern boundary by the existing public right-of-way along the former railway line that runs east-west along the southern boundary of the site. Just a little bit of wider context in terms of the planning constraints and the wider context in relation to this particular site. We can see the existing Clare settlement boundary, which has been extended along the northern side of Cavendish Road to encompass the almost finished approximately 50 unit scheme on the northern side of Cavendish Road, and then otherwise runs along the western boundary of the site, along the rear gardens of the existing dwellings within the settlement of Clare. Other features to note on this point are the conservation area boundary, which covers much of Clare Town Centre in particular, and extends to within about 20 to 30 metres of the southwestern corner of the site. We can just see the hatch line running north-south and then east-west on the screen behind us, and also the purple notation which indicates listed buildings, in this case Clare Hall being the most obvious and closest positioned listed building on the other side of Cavendish Road to the north, with some associated curtilage listed outbuildings. So, as I have explained, this is an outline application. Matters are reserved other than the primary point of vehicular access, which is shown on the northern boundary, accessed south off Cavendish Road, and the three individual points of pedestrian and cycle access along the Cavendish Road frontage. So the plan that we have on the screen is indicative, would not form part of any approval, and those matters relating to layout, for example, and appearance, would all be considered under the reserve matters. However, of course, comfort is, it is necessary for the authority to have comfort that the scheme could, at a reserved matter stage, come forward in an acceptable manner, and obviously they would be assessed against the reserved matters at that particular time. However, looking at the plan that we have on the screen and following the negotiations that we have secured, we can be content, and officers are satisfied that a scheme could come forward under the reserved matters that provided all of the requirements of not only emerging policy AP28, which is the allocation in the emerging policies that that relate to this site, but also to the provisions of the wider emerging policies within the emerging local plan. For example, the proposal indicates a provision of at least 40% affordable housing. The proposal includes at least 40% green and blue infrastructure, including an appropriate suds basin shown at the lowest part of the site in the southeastern corner. The proposal demonstrates a layout that indicates that a suitable relationship can be secured to the off-site wastewater treatment works, noting the noise and odour implications of developing in close proximity to such a facility. The proposal demonstrates that it is capable of providing the pedestrian link to the west of the site, which is shown between points 4 and 5 along the western boundary of the site, and which monies for which were secured as part of the approval of the development on the opposite side of Cavendish Road. The proposal provides extensive sustainable travel connections to Cavendish Road and to the railway walk, including negotiations from officers that now indicate the provision of a footpath on the southern side of the frontage hedge, and the provision of a 3-metre wide footpath on the edge of the road was not viable, would have led to the loss of the hedge and quite conceivably the ditch behind it. So negotiations have secured indicative drawings which demonstrate the provision of the access pedestrian route within the site, thereby retaining the frontage hedge. Further negotiations have also included the provision of an additional point of access at the northeastern corner of the site. Members who were on the site visit will note that the verge is extremely well worn, indicating, I would suggest, a significant level of usage by pedestrians in the vicinity. Not unreasonably, because the site does appear to offer access to whilst it's not a public right of way, the route down the eastern boundary of the site, which provides the potential for a potentially attractive circular walk using the railway walk to head back into Clare itself. An additional access has also been secured indicatively at the centre of the site here. This is an at-grade access. Again, members who are on site, and as I will show you in the photographs shortly, will note the railway line, or the former railway line, starts to reduce its relative levels to the site, such that there is quite a significant difference in levels at the western boundary of the site. I would suggest approximately 3 metres, such that this access here, as it comes forward under the reserved matters, will need to be a stepped access. Provision had originally been made for an at-grade access on the eastern boundary, but because of the likelihood that many pedestrians leaving the site who wish to use an at-grade access will then typically be heading west towards Clare, we have negotiated an additional point of access on that southern boundary. Other features to note within the indicative layout include, again, in accordance with policy AP28, the provision of significant open space, in particular to the south and to the east and boundaries of the site. The south provides an effective relationship and buffer to the heritage asset being the conservation area to the southwest. To the north, it provides a more appropriate retained setting for Clare Hall, the listed building on the northern side of Cavendish Road, whilst also, of course, providing an appropriate transition to the open countryside to the east. Provision, of course, is also made, again in direct accordance with AP28, for the provision of the 30-space car park, again, which is to provide additional car park facilities both for Clare Town Centre and also for users of the country park, which is accessible through the southern boundary of the site and then west into and towards Clare. So again, to note, this is an indicative drawing, but nonetheless, officers have got comfort that at the reserve matter stage, and again, these matters are controlled through conditions recommended on the approval, that an acceptable scheme could come forward under those reserve matters. So the matters that are before us relate simply to the provision of primary access, which in this case includes the provision of the central vehicular access As we can see on both of these drawings, this is the same access, not two separate accesses. It's just a drawing that shows in two phases the entire frontage of the site, plus the provision of 3 points of pedestrian access to here. The one on the west being that which facilitates access to the access route, pedestrian route through the site secured, monies for which were secured as part of the development to the north. The second of which provides access directly to the crossing point. Again, that crossing point, members who are on site will note, is in the process of being constructed as a consequence of that requirement under the development to the northern part of Cavendish Road. And again, the access point directly addresses that existing crossing point. And then the provision of a further exit egress access onto the Cavendish Road in the very northeast corner of the site in order to facilitate the provision of a footpath access cycleway that runs through the site, providing access to that northeast corner of the site with a pedestrian route then that accesses, if it wishes, for those who wish to choose to use the access to the wastewater treatment works for leisure purposes. Amended plans have been secured as part of the negotiations on this application, which have in fact made some changes to the access arrangements. Whilst the position of the access itself, the vehicular access, has not been changed, the proposed highway mitigation works have been altered as a consequence of direct negotiation with the applicant in consultation and conjunction with the Suffolk County Council as local highway authority. These include the removal of what previously were what we call build-outs, physical barriers that extended into the highway to provide a giveaway and a single lane priority through those in order to manage traffic speeds. The proposal instead, at the request of the County Council, is to extend the 30-mile-an-hour zone further to the east. Again, the pictures will show this in due course, and members who are on site will note the current transition between the national speed limit and the 30-mile-an-hour zone is generally in the location of the proposed access. The proposal now includes an extension of that 30-mile-an-hour zone with additional signage and road markings in order to manage the transition between the national speed limit and the 30-mile-an-hour zone. Again, members will note from the report the Section 106 requires a contribution towards the TRO, the Traffic Regulation Order, that will enable those works and all the legal elements that relate to that to take place. So as a consequence of those negotiations and as a consequence of the revised drawings, Suffolk County Council as local highway authority has confirmed that it has no objection to this revised proposal, subject of course to conditions. So just to take members around the site, those that were on site will obviously be familiar. For those that weren't, this is a view taken from the entrance to the school, which is positioned immediately to the north and west of the site. And this is a view looking generally along Cavendish Road. What we can see in this image is the position of the, say existing, but it's in the process of being constructed. It appears as if the surface hasn't been completed on that crossing, but this is the now existing crossing point to the site. So the proposal includes the removal of a small element of hedge here to provide a pedestrian access into the site, plus an additional access just to the right here, which will link up with the pedestrian route through the entirety of the site. This just gives this is not a natural view. This is over the hedge, but does give an indication of the general fall of the site. It does also give an indication of the general topography and the position within the Stour Valley. The site generally falls to its southeastern corner, and then the Stour runs through the bottom of the valley. The area beyond is within Essex. So this is another view looking back along the site frontage. We can see on the right-hand side of this image the almost finished. I believe there may be some occupations, but certainly when we were there on Monday, works were still proceeding at pace on a number of the dwellings on the northern side of Cavendish Road. But we can see again the hedge in the foreground. We can see the transition here between the national speed limit and the 30-mile-an-hour sign, which is almost exactly the position of the proposed access. Now to the very far eastern boundary of the site, again, we can see a vehicle travelling along east along Cavendish Road here behind this existing hedge. This is not the site. This is a view taken from the very northern part of the Anglian Water access track with a view looking east across open arable farmland, again with views of the Stour Valley. View from the same spot. This is now taken north, looking north, I beg your pardon. The building on the left is, I believe, the Roughacre Brewery, which is a Curtis listed building formerly associated with Clare Hall. And again, from the same spot. Now, this is a view looking back into the site itself. So we can see the hedge on the right-hand side, the value of which I believe is clear, and the negotiations to secure that its retention with a footpath within the site absolutely sound. We can see the site generally starts to fall towards the southeast corner, which again is off down to the left. And then a final view also taken from the same position. So this is the site on the right-hand side of the track. This is the access route. It is not a public right-of-way, but it does appear to provide a ready access to pedestrians, and it's simply otherwise an access to the Anglian Water facility. So again, we can see gently the way that the site slopes down to its southeastern corner, and we can also see the more gappy hedge along the southern boundary, which starts to increase as the railway line starts to enter the cutting around about halfway along the southern boundary. So now we're in the very southeast corner of the site. Again, this is a view looking back. What we can see here is we can see the gable, the white rendered painted gable, and the chimneys of Clare Hall, which is the nearest listed building to the site, and the gable of the Curtis listed Roughacre Brewery. The site is on the left-hand side of this track. The land on the right is outside of the site. And then again, from the very southeast corner of the site, this is the lowest part of the site. This is where the open space will be proposed, and of course the SUS features. We can see along the skyline here, the dwellings along the northern side of Cavendish Road. And finally next, we move along to the southern boundary of the site. This gives a very general indication of the relationship of the former railway walk to the site itself. Even at the very southeastern corner of the site, the levels are apparent, it's perhaps fair to say, and the hedge is clearly much gappier in this part of the site. Nonetheless, it is possible at this point and some distance into the site, as we can see on the plans here, to provide two at-grade accesses to the former railway walk. And then as we travel further into the site, we start to see that the hedge on the southern boundary within the railway walk starts to increase in terms of its scale and stature, and we can also see that the railway line, the former railway line, starts to enter into its cutting at this point, and that the levels become somewhat more pronounced relative to both the left-hand and right-hand side of the railway line. In this image, this is looking west, and the application site is behind the hedge on the right-hand side. And again, this is a view I would speculate from very much on the edge of the conservation area to the southwest of the site, and this is now looking east, so the site itself is on the left behind this extensive trees. We can just about see the levels start to increase quite dramatically at this point. The site is probably 3 metres lower than the height of the application site in this very southwestern corner, hence the reason why this access, when it comes forward under the reserve matters, will need to be a stepped access. So to summarise the consultee responses, or some of the key consultee responses, all of which of course are included in more detail within this morning's report. Clare Town Council have made comments, albeit without specifically objecting, albeit again members will note the nature of those comments in relation to highway related matters in particular. They also raised comments in relation to the location of the car park and relating to infrastructure contributions. Suffolk County Council Ward Member Councillor Bobby Bennett supports the position adopted by the Town Council. I know Councillor Bobby Bennett is here this morning. Suffolk County Council Highways, who will also have an officer here in attendance if that is necessary, raised no objections, subject to conditions. And other key consultees, other than those summarised in the report, include the Lead Local Flood Authority, who have no objections subject to conditions, and of course, and this is a key one, Anglian Water, who have raised no objection to the relationship to their key facility. In terms of wider public representations, again, they are limited. We have one third-party comment received, again, which is summarised within today's report. I just want to dwell relatively briefly on this slide. This is what we call a heads of terms, the Section 106 agreement. I just want to make the point, which is an important one, is that the figures are calculated on a per dwelling basis, not as a sum total. And the reason this is important and is to note is because the application is for up to 70 dwellings. So it is possible that the proposal may come forward at the reserve matters with fewer than 70 dwellings, in which case these are not absolute figures, but they would then be calculated on a pro rata basis. So just to summarise, the development provides for up to 70 dwellings on an emerging allocated site. So, as I explained briefly before I started the presentation, the development is technically a departure. What I mean by a departure is that it doesn't satisfy the provisions of our current adopted local plan. And the reason for that is because this is outside of the settlement boundary on land within countryside, where, speaking in very broad terms, a proposal for 70 dwellings and for a public car park does not meet the definition of development that would normally be allowed under our current policies. However, the reason why officers are satisfied that we are able to recommend approval in this instance is because of the advanced stage of the emerging local plan, and in particular the lack of any material objections to this allocation means that as a matter of planning balance, officers feel that sufficient weight can be attached to the emerging plan to enable support to be offered in principle. Obviously, as I have explained, and these are illustrative, the matters of detail would follow at the reserve matter stage, but officers also have comfort that those matters could come forward in an acceptable manner based on the indicative layout plan that we have negotiated. It is another final point that I do wish to make, and again, this is not determinative, I do need to make that point, but following the publication of the National Planning Policy Framework, the revised NPPF in December 24, the LPA cannot currently demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply. And this does mean that largely on a technicality, because at the point when we adopt our emerging plans, we will have a 5-year housing land supply again, but it does mean that as a matter of law, what's known as the tilted balance applies, and that means that in national planning law, planning permission should in any event be granted unless relevant policies in the NPPF provide a strong reason for refusal, or otherwise where the adverse effects of granting planning permission would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. So that's, I do believe, largely contextual. The weight that officers feel they are able to attach to the emerging local plan is the reason why we feel this is capable of approval. So again, just to very briefly summarise, provides an indicative details of a suitable layout, including an appropriate quantum of open space, acceptable access arrangements. The development indicates excellent sustainable links to the railway walk to the south and, of course, to Cavendish Road to the north. The key relationship to the Anglian Water wastewater treatment works can be considered satisfied. The relationship to off-site designated heritage assets can be considered satisfied. Again, space is retained to the north, east and south of the site to respect and reflect the relationship to the conservation area and to Clare Hall, listed building to the north, and of course to provide an appropriate transition to the countryside to the east. The application has considered matters relating to trees, ecology, including biodiversity net gain, with relevant conditions recommended, and the application has also considered drainage and flooding, again with relevant conditions recommended. So on that basis, the application is recommended for approval with conditions. This is subject to the completion of a Section 106 agreement within the heads of terms set out within the officer report. And of course, just to note, the conditions relate to those as per the revisions within the late paper. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dave. And we turn our attention to the registered speakers. Welcome to Councillor Bobby Bennett, who is the County Councillor for Clare. And we've got Sam Hollingworth, welcome, as the agent for the application. So, Bobby, you've got 3 minutes to address the committee. Just wait until it goes red. It will get there eventually, I'm sure. Oh, have you pressed the actual? Yeah. Now wait for it to go red. It will get there.
There we go.
There you go. You're on.
Good morning, Chair, councillors, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. I wanted to highlight some of the community concerns about the impact this application may have on the A10 92 Cavendish Road. And whilst I appreciate that this application is not responsible for fixing an existing problem, it is important that the committee understand the challenges that there are already, and therefore the detrimental impact that this application will likely have. There's been a long-running campaign to restrict HGVs, which has just finished the consultation stage. And last year, we were successful in having the A1092 reduced to a local access lorry route as part of the review of the Suffolk Strategic Lorry Network. This road is also the route to school. The secondary school is located just a few metres away from the site at the top left of the picture up there. And there have sadly been accidents involving children on their way to school, including a young girl who was hit by a car in 2023, which was widely reported in the press. And we're already looking to see what we can do to make this safer. And a feasibility study for a pedestrian crossing was carried out, and it showed that there was already sufficient conflict between the number of vehicles and number of pedestrians to justify a zebra crossing, and that is prior to any additional development. Additionally, as the planning officer has explained, there is a site that is being developed opposite this proposal, and we have not yet seen the full impact, and there is significant concern about what the cumulative impact of both these sites will be. Now, I appreciate the developer had initially put in build-outs and that these have been removed following dialogue with Suffolk Highways, and I understand the reasons for that. But I do have concerns that the remaining measures are insufficient in the eyes of the residents to mitigate against the application and keep this road safe. There's a real opportunity to get this right for the residents of Clare, to help ensure that what is already a difficult road doesn't become worse, and to keep the residents walking into town and the children walking to school and all that drive on it safe. I do not believe that every avenue has been explored to find a solution that is meaningful, proportionate and acceptable to highways, and I would urge the committee to prioritise the safety of Clare residents as part of your deliberation. Thank you.
Thank you, Bobby. Sam, you've got 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to address the committee. This application, submitted last October, is the result of several years of positive working with the Council. It aligns with the Council's emerging local plan and has involved extensive pre-application engagement with the local community, Town Council and other stakeholders. The site has undergone a thorough assessment and appraisal through the Council's local plan process, leading to its allocation for new homes and a public car park for Clare in the proposed final new local plan. The examining inspectors of this plan have raised no concerns about this allocation, which notably is the only new residential allocation for Clare. The application is informed by the Council's evidence base, as well as a suite of technical studies addressing various issues, all scrutinised by the relevant consultees. This outline application seeks permission for development in principle. If this application is approved, members will of course have opportunity to scrutinise a detailed scheme limited to a maximum of 70 dwellings in due course. However, we wish to highlight that an illustrative layout has been provided with the application that demonstrates how a high quality scheme for 70 new homes and a car park can be accommodated, accounting for all the constraints. The proposed development includes much needed affordable homes, at least 40% of the eventual total number of homes to be delivered on the site, market housing, and a new public car park long sought after in Clare. The new car park is approximately a 10-minute walk to both the centre of Clare via Cavendish Road and to Clare Castle via new connections via the railway walk. The transport-related mitigation measures proposed are those that have been recommended following discussions with the local highway authority. And they'll be controlled by planning conditions and obligations, and additionally there'll be a travel plan required as well. The application delivers substantial benefits in addition to the homes and car park, including provision of green space exceeding the minimum requirement, including new publicly accessible green infrastructure and a proposed community orchard, provision of children's play space, new pedestrian connections, including an east-west link alongside Cavendish Road within the site boundary, numerous ecological enhancements, including biodiversity net gain exceeding the minimum requirement, and economic benefits supporting jobs and additional expenditure in the local area. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Sam. Members, committee debate, but I'd just like to say welcome again to Peter from Suffolk County Council Highways, who is here to address any concerns and questions that we may have. So it's always a delight to get a Suffolk County Council Highways expert in our midst. Thank you very much. Okay, so I've got Councillor Thorndyke, please.
Thank you, Chair.
I noticed we have no ward representative from the council on this. We have no input from the ward councillors. There's 3 of them on this patch. So if there were concerns, I would have thought they would have been raised. I hear what Bobby's got to say, but, you know, the same applies to almost every village in the area. Doctors, abysmal, etc., etc. So I think David's worked very hard on this and I see no problems with it, so thank you.
Are you making a proposal, councillor, at this point?
If you wish, I will make a proposal that it's approved.
I'm not wishing to put any pressure on you, but if I count as a yes,
yes,
then is there a seconder? Councillor Whittam, would you like to speak at this point, councillor?
Thank you. Yeah, I think David's done and the officers have done a fantastic job on this, and it looks to be a potentially wonderful site. I was just interested in the concerns over the traffic, but I think they'd been answered by the moving of the 30 limit. And obviously then that comes down to enforcement by our good old traffic police. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whittam. Councillor Mulmay-White, please.
Thank you, Chairman. As you know, one of my favourite phrases is cumulative impact, and we quote it at every new application virtually. And it's so frustrating that this doesn't seem to be able to, we don't seem to be able to resolve this as a planning committee ever. So it is a concern because I completely understand about the extra traffic on this road, and it is the cumulative impact that causes the problems at the end of the day. So I hope that there will be a lot further work done on traffic management on this road if this development goes ahead. The other point I'm interested in is the 60 units was the original master plan, and a lot of the pre-application discussion was around this 60 unit level. I see that there was discussion about an 80 unit master plan, and then we seem to have come down in the middle at 70. But I can't quite see why we're deviating from the 60 unit, particularly given the close proximity to the sewage works at the bottom towards the bottom of the site. I would have thought you would need to have a wider cordon sanitaire maybe, and therefore putting more houses down at the bottom may not be appropriate. This discussion around the wording too. We've used this phrase up to 70 quite often, but I noticed the inspector is coming back with the phrase around 70 quite often. And I do think this is going to be a concern. Around is a very ambiguous word, whereas the up to does define a limit. So I am concerned with the emerging local plan changes that are coming through on that particular wording. And I hope that we're not taking that into account at this particular application. And I would like to go back to the up to 60 units. And that would be my preferred. But I can't make another
You can't.
suggestion at this motion. Thank you, though, for listening, Chairman.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Mulmay. Councillor London, please, if your microphone is working. Yes, you're on.
Thank you very much, Chair. Sorry, when I tried to put myself into the queue, I automatically started speaking, so I think there was an issue there. First of all, Dave, brilliant in terms of pedestrian connectivity. I've seen a few sites that have come through where we don't have pedestrian connectivity, and it's really nice to see one where people are going to be able to flow through the site. I have just a quick question with regards to the surface of those paths, whether that's been determined yet, and whether that will be whether we're looking at that being suitable for cycleway access as well as just pedestrian access. I also have a question which is probably going to be more directed at Peter, our guest from Highways, with regards to the the idea of how we can interact with this road in the best way possible. I'd really like to understand some of the thought processes behind the situation that we are in at the minute, behind the non-introduction of a roundabout and making the entrance to this site and the entrance to the site opposite, sort of not opposite each other, which in my naive assumption would at least sort of have allowed for the passive provision for future roundabouts if such things were necessary, and sort of questions about what kind of passive provision might be allowed within this. This is an outline application, so if the northern site does come online and we find that there are significant issues, what wiggle room do we have with this site to interact with that? Third point I have is the car park, which is, I've never seen something like this before. I'm not familiar with the car park, so I'd just like to understand where that's coming from. Is that being considered effectively a 106 contribution from the developer to the town council? Just how does that fit in? And finally, my standard question about green space management. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor London. Through Dave and through Penny, we'll invite Peter. Okay, that's fine. Councillor Waldron, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I'm just going through to section 16 on the housing. It says the affordable housing tenure to be 67% rented. Now, I don't know if there's any way of doing it, but with the various parishes that I'm involved in, a housing association buys the houses and then, especially in my parish, seems to rent them out to people in Haverhill, where the people in the parish are left with a mouthful of teeth and nowhere to live. Is there no way we can attach a condition that the percentage of the houses go to people in need in Clare? That's all. Thank you.
That's a very fair point, and I'm sure officers will address that. Councillor Neal, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a question for Peter, really. We're looking at the impact, the cumulative effect of the traffic from this development. But it hasn't been realised. It was said by Bobby that it hasn't been fully realised about the impact from the development across the road. So how do you make an assessment on what's acceptable, what the capacity load of that road could possibly be if what's across the road hasn't been fully materialised at this moment in time? So that's a question for Peter. The car park was mentioned. Ownership or management of that car park, who would that fall down to? I assume somebody would adopt the responsibility of it anyway. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Neal. And the same response to Councillor London is all of the questions to Peter will come via Dave and Penny, but it's been noted. Thank you for that. Councillor Sayer, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be brief. My concern is just the traffic flow on that road. A simple solution, if it can't fit in a roundabout, is traffic lights, but also, that's it. Anything coming out of Clare in the mornings with the children on the road, people going to school, wanting to turn right into there, across the traffic to get to the car park maybe. Traffic lights obviously would seem to be an answer. I wonder if it had been considered.
Thank you, Councillor Sayer. I'll refer the councillor to my previous comments, so they'll come through the officers. We've got Councillor Miller-Jones, please.
Thank you. Yeah. I just have a question about something that was mentioned in the representations about a study that showed the need for a zebra crossing in the area. And I'm just wondering, hopefully officers will know something about this, just is that in the same place that this crossing is planned? What would happen if this didn't go through? Would
who was it who commissioned that study and who would then be responsible for providing that crossing, or is the crossing in a different place that they had looked at and will both potentially happen? So I just wanted to clarify that about the crossings. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Glossop, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we walked along the road on Monday. It was about 11:30 on a Monday morning, and the traffic was horrific. It was very scary. My question is, obviously, we have an entrance to the on the other side of the road to the site that's being worked on at the moment, and I'm just a bit worried that we've got an entrance one side, and we're going to put another entrance to this site on the other side, which are both very close, and I worry about that. And if it's an A road, lorries can go along it anyway, I'm led to believe, so I can't see how we're going to stop lorries going along an A road. The other thing I don't understand, and I might be showing my ignorance, on page 80, it says, the affording housing tenure to be 67% rented, preference to social rent, and 33% shared ownership. So that's 100%, isn't it? So if you want to buy a house on there and not do either of those things, where are they coming? I don't quite understand those figures. So I might be...
It's 40%.
It's of the 40%, I believe, but you look, as chairman, I always default to officers, because if I don't, I get a kick in the shins. All right? So, but I think it's of the 40%, councillor. Right. Thank you, members. Over to officers then, and of course, invite Peter to comment as and when you feel appropriate. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. I will go through the notes that I have made. I will defer either to Penny or, of course, to Peter as the expert in relation to some of the very specific highways questions that have been raised. But in terms of what I have noted, the first query was from Councillor Mame White and related to questions about the rationale for the number of units. This is a matter that was discussed quite extensively within the examinations as part of the emerging local plan. And the direction of travel from the inspectorate and from officers, of course, is to move away from a prescriptive number. Around offers flexibility both up and down, of course. The ultimate requirement is to ensure that a development is generally of that order, and of course, and fundamentally, that it washes its own face in terms of all of the requirements within the emerging policies. So in terms of the extent of open space, in terms of providing affordable housing, in terms of any other specific requirements of each particular allocation, for example, in this case, the requirement for significant open space to the south and to the east, the provision of the car park, etc. And if it does that, and it provides a quality development, there is some wriggle room within the scope of the emerging policy to provide a scheme that doesn't hit that exact number. So that's the rationale for around 70, and it is, I strongly suspect this is the first of the emerging allocations to come before you. I suspect that will be a feature of many of the subsequent ones as well. Councillor London raised a question about the paths themselves. They are not known at this stage because this is a reserved matter, but yes, they will be shared cycle and pedestrian surfaces. A question also about management of the car park. I'll just draw members' attention. Again, the location and the detail of the car park, of course, is another reserved matter, but there is condition 39, which relates to the processes for managing the car park once planning permission has been granted for it. Councillor Waldron, a query about whether the affordable housing could be to meet a local need. Typically, that would be acceptable in the case where it was a rural exception site, but in the case of an allocation, which will ultimately be within the settlement boundary, an additional condition restricting occupation to a local need is not something that would typically come forward. Councillor Neil raised questions about the car park again, so I've answered that in terms of condition 39. Councillor Sayer raised questions which I will defer to Peter Bradfield with your agreement, Chair, as will I to those from Councillor Miller-Jones, which related to the need for a zebra crossing and the potential for its relationship to the potential existing crossing. And finally, yes, just to clarify, Councillor Glossop, again, you raised questions about the relationship between the accesses, which I will just defer to Peter as the County Council officer on. And also, yes, the percentage relates to 100% of the 40%, as clarified by the Chair. I think that's everything on my list, so thank you.
So just in terms of those questions for Peter, and if you're happy then, Chair, we'll hand
Yes.
over to him.
Yes.
I think the first of those were from Councillor London, and it was almost an exploration of the queries about whether a roundabout was something that had been considered, or whether this site had been laid out in such a way that would enable it to interact with the road and the other previously approved development that might allow for further improvements if they were necessary.
Good morning, committee, everybody. The roundabout, I can see why you would be identifying a roundabout as an alternative means of access into both that northern and southern developments. The Highway Authority wouldn't favour a roundabout to serve those numbers of developments, because the threshold for movement associated with both of those developments wouldn't meet that threshold for when we thought a roundabout would be necessary. And in the scheme of things, I think the development to the north is 50 dwellings, and the development to the south, as we know, is going to be in the region of 60 to 80, but both some way under where I would recommend a roundabout being appropriate for access into those sites. One of the councillors, I have made notes, but if I could refer to you generally, please, rather than going back to specific councillors. One of the councillors made the observation about the access being located more close to the proximity of the existing access into the northern development. The access for the northern development went through planning some time ago, and as you know, that's already been set. The access for this development comes forward from the developer, not per se from the Highway Authority. I would be apprehensive about recommending to you an access junction from the southern development directly opposite that northern development, creating effectively a new crossroads. In my opinion, a staggered junction where the entrance to the south and the entrance to the north have some distance between them is going to reduce the probability or the possibility of confusion around those junctions and accidents that could happen as a result of that. So for the roundabout, we don't think the volumes of traffic are acceptable to bring forward a roundabout. Roundabouts, whilst they have the impact of slowing traffic, they are also quite high locations for other sorts of accidents, notably for pedestrians and for cyclists. So whilst a roundabout might have been considered for a development such as this, I don't think it met the threshold necessary, and I don't think it would have brought about the speed calming and the improved pedestrian cycle access that the sustainable travel policies that we have are trying to promote. The car park was mentioned. The Highway Authority also would like some further information about the car park, and that will come forward with the reserved matters as to more clarification about where the ongoing pedestrian routes will be, and clarification as to what extent this will become an overflow car park for the school and for school drop-off. And at the moment, we haven't really got information clarifying those things, but that will come with the reserved matters. Cumulative impact on the carriageway was mentioned by a number of the councillors. And I take your point, Councillor Mardmay, about it's very difficult because the cumulative impact of maybe development that we were talking about 10 years ago, and it just slowly but slowly gets added on to. What I would say in this regard for this site is that because it's an A classification carriageway that carries really quite high volumes of traffic, I think the cumulative impact on that road of the developments themselves will be modest. Probably, if I choose my words, the word insignificant, I think, is probably perhaps not the right word, but the cumulative impact of the traffic generated by this development in relation to the traffic that's already moving on that carriageway and the growth of traffic that is likely to occur on that carriageway just as a result of society changing, then I think that the actual site traffic is going to be really rather low and of little cumulative impact, really. That's not to say, though, that there aren't concerns about the volume of traffic on the carriageways generally and on that road. I hear what you're saying, but with respect to this development, the cumulative impact also introduces the idea that the development might mean that the road reaches some sort of capacity, or could be that the development could take this carriageway over its capacity. I don't think that's the case. There is sufficient capacity on this road for the traffic that wants to move along it, and I don't think the development is going to take this carriageway towards a capacity problem. Were traffic lights considered to get traffic in and out of this development? No, not specifically. Traffic lights weren't brought forward by the development. If the development were fairly significantly larger, creating more trips, I think there would have been merit in traffic lights being assessed. But for a development of 60 to 80 dwellings, the number of trips into and out of that development will be low relative to the movement on the road. The zebra crossing, I probably would defer to Councillor Bennett's knowledge about this, but my understanding is that when zebra crossings have been considered in the past, they've been considered at different locations relative to this development and where you might imagine a zebra crossing should or could go in. I would have thought that the benefits of a zebra crossing for the overall community would be better served if the zebra crossing was further to the west. I think if this development was to deliver a zebra crossing, it would be located within the frontage of the development and then probably be the wrong spot for a zebra crossing. Partly because the sustainable links that this development is going to bring forward into the town centre are really good. It will promote walking and it will promote cycling for residents that choose to do that. We can't make anybody do it, of course. That's quite correct. But so this development itself isn't going to deliver sufficient pedestrian movement to the northern side of the road that it would merit a zebra crossing being delivered by the development. However, the community's aspiration for a zebra crossing for road safety purposes, I think, is important, but that will bring forward a crossing at a different location, and this development, I think, would legitimately be able to say, this isn't a measure that is related to our development. This is a road safety aspiration that the community have, and it's not something that's incumbent on this development to deliver that. Thank you.
Any more responses, Dave? No? Penny? No? Councillor Whittam, please.
Thank you, Chair. A thought occurs to me that this whole part of the Cavendish Road is within the in fact, the whole length of it, wouldn't it be better to be a 20-mile-an-hour limit the whole length rather than a 30, given the children that use that road, and that properly enforced with a GATSO?
Thank you, Councillor Whittam. I'll come back to you, Peter, in a sec, because I've got Councillor Sayer, please.
Thank you, Chair. My only comment is that Peter refers to the size of the development being just 70 houses. The point is there is also an additional 30 car parking spaces, so it would be slightly higher on that point. The majority of people coming to use that car park will be coming out of Clare, and as they come out of Clare, they have to turn right across the oncoming traffic to get into the development and to access that. So, you know, it's busy times like in the morning. It is the turning right aspect that could be difficult, but I do take the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit as also being quite a positive answer to the problem.
Thank you, Councillor Sayer. I'll go straight back to you, Peter, if I may.
Yeah, I take your point about the additional movement that will come from the car park. I think in truth, the 70 dwellings plus car park movement still doesn't get to a threshold where a roundabout would certainly be necessary. For those people that are coming out of Clare to use the car park to take their children to school, they will face maybe a period of queuing, waiting for a gap on the westbound flow of traffic, so they're able to complete that manoeuvre. I don't think that gap will come along so infrequently that the flow of traffic would need to be stopped by a red traffic light to enable them to do it. I think it would make life more convenient for them. But it's a very expensive business installing traffic lights on a carriageway, and not in proportion to the scale of development that's coming forward.
Thank you, Peter.
Peter from Councillor Whittam.
Yeah, that's true. There was the 20-mile-an-hour question, Peter. Yeah.
That's gone red, but you can hear me. Oh, there we go. 20 mile an hour is an advisory speed limit that is sometimes used in the vicinity of schools. Given the concerns around traffic on the carriageway in this vicinity, I think the use of a 20 mile an hour advisory speed limit in that vicinity of the school access would be something that we should take away and consider. And I think, albeit that they are effectively advisories, that they do have an impact on the way drivers, and combined with maybe some enhanced school crossing type of signage to further try to calm speeds, I would recommend that that's a matter that we should take away and perhaps be able to capture in our reserve matters, or as part of the section 278 for the works that are already envisaged within the highway. Either of those, I think, would be acceptable ways of dealing with that.
Thank you, Peter. Councillor London, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yet more questions through you to Peter, if that's okay. Which is just to sort of to understand fully, what number of houses would there need to be on this on a site for you to change for the position to change to being one of a more involved thing, such as a roundabout or the traffic lights or something like that? Obviously, we've said 70, and the 30 car park is not enough. So I'm just wondering, exactly where that threshold is. And secondly, I notice, I think if we go back to the heads of terms, there was nothing for highways on there other than a flat £15,000. Obviously, there are some elements such as the pedestrian crossing, which we've explored that, and we know that that's mostly not going to be generated by the site, but there will be a small amount of foot traffic generated by the site that will be using that. And I'm wondering whether it would be appropriate to apportion a certain amount of money in the heads of terms commensurate with the number of people that are living on this site for this zebra crossing that might be coming forward.
Thank you, Councillor. The point about the threshold, I think, is something that we could do offline. I don't think it's actually relative to the application that's in front of us. And before we come back to you, Peter, there's a couple of other councillors wanting to speak. Councillor Neil, please.
You've just put a block on what I was going to say, so that's fine.
I'm very sorry.
That's okay.
Well, okay, that's fair enough. Councillor Dicker, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to make the site visit on Monday, but I did visit Clare for the first ever time about 18 months ago when I was chairman of the council. The town council invited me down there to meet them all, and went back a couple of other times. And I spoke to them regarding what their wish list was and the issues down there, and it was obviously the usual traffic and a car park and lorries and that. So I'm quite pleased to see that a car park will be coming forward on this with any development. They weren't against development down there in the town council at all. Clare is an absolutely wonderful place to live. There's no doubt about it that I was so pleased to be able to visit and see the town. But obviously, people want to live there and they need the housing, and we've got this application in front of us. And I can see that the work that David has put into it, and I wouldn't expect anything different for David to be very thorough in getting the best plans out there. I'm very pleased with what I'm seeing on the outline, and I'm trusting when it comes to reserved matters, everything will be covered. What is very pleased is to have the officer from Suffolk County Council here, because the difference it has made today for an application that, it is a large amount of houses and that. We know the existing issues, the town council know the existing issues, and we are getting the explanations as to why and why not. Otherwise, without Peter being here, we would all be saying they don't know what they're doing, they haven't had a look, and all these sort of things. And we're getting the explanations here, and I'm really pleased with this, because the only other way as a district council we can argue with the Suffolk County Council is by employing our own highways evidence and go against. But what we're getting is the actual evidence here now as to why. So I will, when it comes to the vote, I don't think anything else is going to change the mind. I will be voting for this, and I have every faith in our officer here, David, and Suffolk County Council to get this the best they can. It's never going to be perfect. I did think about asking through the chair what a wish list from Suffolk County Council or the highways would be if we could have whatever you wanted. But I don't see the point, because it ain't going to happen. We're never going to get all we want, because we need housing, and with it comes cars. Obviously, with the road being downgraded with the lorries, that's a good thing and that. But as I say, I will be supporting this, and thank you, through the chair, thank you very much for the county officer being here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dicker. If I could, I would make Peter an honorary member of the committee here at West Suffolk, to be fair. Have we got anything to respond to, please?
One question from Councillor London regarding the zebra crossing on the 106.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully the final response from me. Councillor London raised questions, and I actually believe in relation to the potential monies for a zebra crossing, I believe Peter Bradfield's actually answered this question in a roundabout way in explaining that, in his view, there weren't the sufficient movements from this site, from south to north, to justify monies towards a zebra crossing itself, and of course that the zebra crossing, if it were to be provided, would be some distance to the west in any event, catering most likely for pedestrians leaving Clare toward the school rather than from this site. Obviously there is a crossing that is in the process of being provided. It's not a zebra crossing, but it is a crossing at this point here, exactly where you can see the cursor, which was secured as part of the approval of the development to the northern side, and which officers are satisfied is sufficient to cater for pedestrian movements from south to north generated otherwise by this development. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Councillor Glossop, please.
Can I just have clarification, please? I thought you couldn't downgrade A roads. And secondly, I didn't think you could put 20-mile-an-hour speed limits on A roads. So if I can just have clarification on those, please.
Okay, straight back to you, Peter. Oh no, you've pressed it off as a. Yeah, it will go. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Sorry, Councillor Glossop. So the 20 mile an hour, well, that would be an advisory matter for something. You'll have seen them on roads outside schools. 20's plenty. So it would be related to the school, that measure, and not the development as such. I'm sorry, I don't know whether there's anything statutory related that would prevent us putting that in on the A-class road. I don't think there would be anything preventing that. I think it's something that could be done if it was agreed, but I'd need to check to tell you that with absolute certainty. There was one further question that related to works in the highway and how they would be secured if the Section 106 contribution hadn't extended to those works. And my observation for that is that the works would be within the extent of the maintainable highway, and therefore they would be done under another process, which is called Section 278. That's the next section under the Highways Act where we enter into an agreement with the developer for works that are going to be done in the highway or within the extent of the highway. Those works are reviewed by us. We issue technical approval for those works if they're satisfactory, and then the works are carried out at the expense of the developer using a contractor, using some sort of approved contractor. So for works that come through Section 278, we don't take any forward financial contribution through the Section 106 process. And I think the works that you were alluding to would fall under that Section 278 process and not require the Section 106 contribution.
Thank you, Peter. Councillor Glossop also asked about downgrading the A1092, but
yeah,
I'm not sure the road.
That was with respect, I think, to the lorry.
Yeah, I was going to say it's actually from a strategic lorry route to a local lorry route, as opposed to going from an A to an A minus.
It'll stay as an A classification road. Yeah. And there will be no restrictions on users of that road. There is no weight restriction. There's no width restriction. So the restriction on the highway users that extend to all of us, regardless of what vehicle, is really the speed limit there, which is going to be extended to compensate for the new access. The downgrading, if you will, of that road in terms of its HGV was that it used to be classified as a strategic lorry route. And the community, understandably, didn't want any measures which might increase the number of HGVs on the road. So that, in Suffolk's lorry plan, that has been amended, and it's no longer being considered a strategic route, but it's being considered an approved route. And you may come back and say, well, could you tell us exactly what the difference will be in terms of what the residents will experience between a strategic and an approved route? It may be over time that removing that strategic route category will encourage HGV drivers or route mapping software to put less traffic on that route. But the change of the status, it didn't give Suffolk County Council any further powers or any new powers to compel changes of user on the route. Anybody in any vehicle can use that A1092, and it is an important route for people, albeit that for the residents of Clare and all of the villages and towns, it's very unpleasant, excessive HGV use. But all of those HGVs are going somewhere, carrying something, contributing to our economy, and it's just... And the road is perfectly capable of that traffic in terms of its construction and size.
Thank you, Peter. Can I just go to Councillor Neil first, Bobby, and then I'll come back to you. Have you found a way around my earlier judgment, Councillor Neil? Is that what's happened?
No. Thank you, Chair. I've got no problem with the development, but it's a typical thing that we're going to see time and time again. There's a nice development, but the infrastructure, this road is a busy road at this moment in time without anything that's added to it. We've already heard that there's been an accident with children on this road. And then in the same conversation, we're talking about the expense of a crossing. And that doesn't sit comfortable with me. How many children have to get hurt before we put a crossing in, and at what price? That doesn't sit comfortable with me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Now, Bobby, are you going to add something to the discussion, or was it?
At your discretion, Chair, it was a point of clarification in that we have consulted on a traffic regulation order that would restrict HGVs along the A92 from Long Melford to Baythorn Bridge. So there is meaningful activity to restrict HGVs, and I just wanted to make that clear.
Thank you very much indeed for that. I'm going to summarise. There's nothing coming from officers any further. And before someone else puts the cue to speak on, it was proposed some time ago by Councillor Thorndike to approve in line with the officer's recommendation of approval, and that was seconded by Councillor Whittam. Can I see a show of hands in favour, please? And those against, and show your hand clearly, Councillor Neil. That's it, we've got you.
So that is 13 votes in favour and 1 vote against. The motion is carried and the application approved.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you, members. Thank you, speakers. I've been appraised of the fact there's fresh tea and coffee and biscuits waiting for us, so we can have a break before the next application. Your attention to the fact we're moving on now to agenda item 7, which is the return of the application associated with the windmill in Thurston Road at Pakenham. James is the presenting case officer, so over to you, James. Oh, sorry, Andrew. Would you come? Please, I do apologise. No. Yes, you wouldn't make a district councillor by not. Over to you, James.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon. So this application again is DC 240395, which is for a change of use of land for the siting of a temporary above-ground swimming pool used for training dogs in water. As you may or will recall, this was presented at Development Control Committee on the 5th of February last month. It holds an officer recommendation of refusal, which is contrary to the no objections from Parish Council and support from Councillor Andrew Speed. I understand Councillor Speed wasn't able to attend today. I did receive an email this morning just asking to express his support for the application again on his behalf. For the benefit of the committee or any members that might have missed the last presentation, I will just give a quick overview of what the proposal is. So at Development Control Committee last month, members were minded to approve the application, which was contrary to the officer recommendation of refusal. At that point, the decision-making protocol was invoked. The reason for the minded to recommendation was that members resolved that the level of public benefit from the proposed development outweighed any identified harm to Pakenham Windmill. So this decision-making protocol requires a more detailed analysis of public benefits that can be afforded to the proposal, and then also to set out any risks that might arise should the application be approved. Just to go back over what exactly is proposed, this is a change of use of agricultural land, and it will site an above-ground seasonal pool specifically designed with the intention of water-based dog training. It consists of the ground swimming pool, the connected dock, and then obviously the fencing enclosure. Let's go back one slide. So while planning permission is sought for a permanent use, the development is seasonal in that it would operate from April to October, obviously subject to weather conditions, and then the pool and dock would be removed outside of those months. So just to go back over the plans, on the left is the amended location plan, and on the right a snippet from GIS with an aerial view. So the location plan does now incorporate access and car parking as were previously shown, so it could be controlled by condition. The proposed development is located northwest of Pakenham Windmill. Just to go over back, is a Grade 2 star listed building, and it would be accessed off Thurston Road with glimpse views from Thieves Lane, which we saw on the site visit last month. So this slide is just the proposed floor plan and measurements of the development. Just noting again that the orientation of the pool and associated structure was rotated, unlike the pictures will show. So the dock will now be at the opposite side of the site, or the plot specifically. So this is just a photograph to give you an idea of what it was like. So this is the dock here. It would now be at this side. So the lower in height element of the pool would be closer to the windmill than the dock itself. So the heritage statement tells us that the above ground pool is 9.75 metres long, 4.8 metres wide and 1.2 metres high. It's connected to the dock, and that itself is 6.4 metres long and 3 metres high. And then it's fenced with 1.2 metre stock fencing, which in total is around 24.3 metres in length and then 10.6 metres in width. Moving on to photographs, the next 3 slides only show explicitly photos of the pool itself, just to give you an idea of what it looked like again. So the first photograph is looking northwest within the site next to an agricultural building. The next building is looking east from the meadow in front of the Dutch barn that we saw on site, and then the view looking south from the meadow. So moving swiftly on to the risk assessment itself. Members made several observations. So that includes the colour of the dock, the site's context as an active farmyard rather than open countryside, and that views would be restricted to within the site itself. It was also observed the rotation of the structure could help mitigate visual impacts. In respect of colour, just to draw on that quickly, it has been confirmed that this would remain as blue. It matches the company branding, advertisement and logo. There was a suggestion and now intention to use some form of camouflage netting just to cover the dock siding when it's not in use. Just to put it out very clearly, because of its operational and very easily removable nature, it couldn't be controlled by a planning condition, so we can't attach this any weight in a planning decision, although I understand the intention behind it. Members are also identified several potential benefits, including increased visitor numbers, greater public engagement with a heritage asset, and the income contributing to ongoing maintenance and preservation of the site. So officers maintain a recommendation of refusal because the public benefits described fall substantially short of the threshold required by the MPPF. In addition, expert consultation with the conservation officer determined that the proposal would result in demonstrable harm to a heritage asset. Moving on to the next slide. So just to kind of go back through, the significance of heritage building includes how they're experienced from different viewpoints, which includes their immediate surroundings, being particularly sensitive to change. So in agricultural settings like this, the relationship between farm buildings, former farm buildings, and their environment reflects their historic character and function. If we look at Historic England's guidance, a building's setting contributes to its significance regardless of public access or visibility, and changes to the immediate environment can impact how the building is understood. Experience, even in public views, remain unchanged. So the local planning authority has a legal obligation under the 1990 Planning Conservation and Listed Building Act to prioritise preserving listed buildings and their setting, and we have to demonstrate how we have applied this duty in coming to our decisions. So if the LPA were to approve an application that otherwise, in the view of officers, contradicts historic building protection policies, there is a risk to reputation, and the council must clearly document the material considerations justifying otherwise a departure from our requirement to preserve the setting of listed buildings, and failure to do so and give adequate reasoning could harm the council's reputation, and there is always the potential of exposing a decision to legal challenge. Moving swiftly on again, back to the officer conclusion. So planning permission is sought for a seasonal dog water training facility with a pool enclosure and ancillary development. The setting of the landmark windmill relies on the large and undeveloped area of open space, which provides an open and uninterrupted views. Due to the pronounced location, the size, the garish appearance of the structure, the proposal will appear as an incongruous and conspicuous addition that adversely affects the setting of the Grade 2 star listed building, therefore harming its visual amenity. While the harm identified to the significance is on the middle scale of less than substantial, it still fails to provide clear and convincing justification for the harm, given where there are potentially alternative locations which could be less harmful within the site, and we do not consider that the public benefits would outweigh this harm. As a very last point, if members were to approve this application today, it's recommended that the list of conditions attached as, I believe it's called Appendix 2, with the conditions be attached to any decision issued. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, James. Right, we've got two registered speakers. We've got Kate Ashton, who's a local resident and user of the K9 Dip and Dive, and that's a statement which Helen will read out on her behalf. And we welcome back Andy Brownlee, who's the applicant. So you've got 3 minutes, Helen, on behalf of Kate.
Thank you. I have read through all the documents and appendices relating to this application and listed in the agenda. I remain perplexed as to why the council is minded to refuse this application. I understand a consideration has to be given to its location near to a Grade 2 listed building and the potential harm and risk this might cause the building. However, as it is stated on numerous occasions throughout the various reports, the pool is only visible from Thurston Road once you have entered the site proper and past the main mill shop and dwellings and from Thieves Lane. You cannot see it from the A143, which garners considerably more traffic than either of these roads. Thieves Lane is not a main vehicular thoroughfare, primarily being used for local traffic and farm vehicles as it's a single track. Nor is the vehicle access available for public use. On the many occasions I attended sessions at the site last year, the access point from Thieves Lane was closed off with a gate and a chain and padlock securing this entrance. While the pool may be seen in passing, this gateway, I would hazard that most users of this roadway are giving more consideration to the road conditions rather than what is on the other side of a gateway. Any farm machinery operators would have more of a view of the structure, and again, this would be brief. Much has been made of the detrimental impact of the pool and its colour scheme, bright blue and garish, to quote from your own reports, and that this is not in keeping with the historic land and site in which the windmill sits. A suggestion has been made that camouflage netting could help to mitigate the garish colourway. I'd argue that covering the boarding and pool area with camouflage netting would be more incongruous and present a risk of injury and or harm to those dogs and owners using the space. Comments are made about the farm buildings, which are close to the windmill, being more in keeping with the historical agricultural use of the space. No comment has been made about some of these buildings being in a poor state of repair and dilapidation, which I believe poses more harm and risk to the area in which the windmill is seen and appreciated. Your reports also state that this structure is temporary, not permanent in any way, and only in position from April to October, with construction and removal taking place in mid-March and no later than November. The site parking and facilities of the pool are well maintained and looked after throughout the season of operation and leave little environmental impact on the windmill or site. I would argue that the high number of storms we experienced last year and this year present more risk to the windmill. Your own report states that the parish council supports the application and that there has been no single objection raised from the local community or area. I am aware that there have been numerous statements in support of this application. I know that I myself have made 2 statements in support, and this is my third. You cite a small group of dog users who can afford to use this space do so. I would argue that you have failed to consider that while the number of dogs using the pool at any one time is a small number, no more than 5, they travel from a wider area within the borders of Suffolk and beyond, thereby raising awareness of this site and the historic building located within it, as well as using local amenities and community facilities contributing to the local economy. I urge you to reconsider and pass this application.
Thank you very much indeed, Helen. Right, Andy, over to you for your 3 minutes, sir.
Am I on? Am I? Thank you. Good afternoon all. Thank you for letting me speak again in support of our application to operate a Pakenham windmill. At last month's meeting, it was suggested by the planning officer and reiterated by one of the members that camouflage netting could be used to blend out the blue, and based on that, we have already purchased a huge net which can be used to cover both sides of the pool. We are happy to hang this over the blue ACM boards at all times we're not running sessions, and we feel this is a better option than the suggestion that we change it to black, which I feel would really stand out at all times, whereas the sky blue boards actually blend in with the background sky on bright days being at the elevated position. We have also sourced a waterproof donation box for visitors to be able to make donations towards the windmill, and have also voluntarily agreed with the mill's owner to increase our own rent by 50% from the forthcoming year. The planning officer also states the impact of the pool is less than substantial, but the awareness and extra money that we are raising, we feel is more than substantial and will go a long way to keeping this crumbling building standing. We have explained to the planning officer that we want to clarify to the members here our reasons for wanting to keep the blue boards, as this is our company branding and covers our 4 current boards, our website and our marketing, and so it'll be a huge financial impact on our business to change all of this. The camouflage netting will allow us to keep our branding but also mitigate the visual impact. We explained at the last meeting how our videos, our TV appearances and social media posts have spread awareness of the windmill to millions, not just in the UK, but from countries all over the world. Actual visitors to the pool last year numbered 2,062 dogs and their owners and families, so somewhere in the region of 4,000 to 5,000 actual people, all sharing their photos and stories onto their own social media, further enhancing the awareness and visibility of the windmill. I can't see any other way that the current owners would achieve this kind of publicity to such a wide audience. We have started to discuss plans for fundraising events with the owners and our customers. Local residents and businesses will also be invited to take part and visit the windmill, spend money on a fun event and make donations. This will be promoted via our own socials, local newspapers and in association with local radio stations such as Radio West Suffolk who support us. We would reiterate our words from the previous meeting that we very much appreciate the historic importance of the windmill and will continue to work with the owners to protect the fabric of the building from nature and to keep it in a clean and tidy state. This has now been going on for over a year now since our initial application, and we would like to try to get some conclusion if we can, and I'm happy to answer any questions if it will clarify and move things forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Andy. Councillor Thorndyke, please.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I don't know what's changed since we looked at this last time, so it should be fairly easy to look at again this time. I think this is one case where retrospective planning may be an asset as opposed to anything else. We've had the benefit of this being there for a year. We've had no complaints, no problems, no nothing with it for a year. But we have had a few comments. Last time when we looked at this, there were comments about glimpses of the thing from here, there and various other places. Can I take you back to the first application we had today, which was in a conservation area, not with a listed building? Pod would be visible when traversing the river. However, views will be in passing. Now, we're not applying dual standards, I hope. So I don't see where you can see this from the outside world. Somebody said they could see it from the A143. Well, I suggest they might want to concentrate on 2 mill turnings, a turning into Wixworth and an awful lot of traffic, rather than peering through the hedgerows to try and see this at the mill. And you won't see it most of the year because of the green hedge that's in between. So, Mr. Chairman, I hope we're not going to waste too much time with this today. So, like the last one, I'll propose approval at this stage.
Thank you very much indeed. I'd already noted that down halfway through your presentation. And Councillor London was first in, and your mic is a bit troublesome, isn't it? So, would you like to second it?
I would like to second it, and I will put it on a formal basis, as it were, which is Historic England are on record in the pack saying we would not object to the erection of the proposed pool in principle. I note from our conservation officer that this is considered to be less than substantial harm. I then reference the NPPF 215, where a development proposal will lead to less than significant harm. This harm should be weighed against the public benefits of the proposal, including, where appropriate, securing its optimum viable use. Seeing as this is a demountable pool, I can't think of anything that would be able to bring people into this area that would sort of be more optimum than this particular usage. And I'd also like to reference paragraph 219 of the NPPF, where local planning authorities should look for opportunities for new development within the setting of heritage assets to enhance or better reveal their significance. I think that we have demonstrated that this is enhancing, or not enhancing, but it's enhancing or better revealing. This is better revealing the significance of the windmill by drawing people to the site.
Thank you, Councillor London. Councillor Miller-Jones, please.
Thank you. That was very convincing from both of my colleagues. I thought I was in favour, but I wasn't quite sure. But after hearing that, I am definitely sort of in agreement with that. I think it makes a lot of sense. I had a sort of hypothetical question, which may not be relevant, but just on the issue of the discussion that's happened previously about the colour, the fact that the applicant doesn't want to change the colour. The officers have sort of said that they are sort of still minded to sort of not to approve. I was just wondering how much weight is being given here to that colour. So if there was a situation, hypothetically, where members went with the officers, is the colour this huge thing where
if the applicant then did change the colour, would that change the officers' minds on that? I was just wondering how massive that is when we're discussing this. But overall, I am also in support of the proposal that's been made. Thank you.
I hope you will forgive me. I'd rather not deal with hypothetical situations, in all fairness. Oh, okay. Councillor Ball, please.
Sorry. You'll have to tie your hands down.
I know, I'll sit on them. I support everything that's been said, and I won't go on at length. What I would say, the blue colour, if you look at some of the really big storage sheds that go up, they use blue and grey to make them blend in, because I think Mr. Brownlee said sky blue. I don't have a problem, and above all, I think, it is temporary. So I have no problem with supporting this, and I won't press the button.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Ball. Councillor Waldron, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was basically going to say not quite as long-winded, but as much as Councillor London said. You've got more or less agreement from English Heritage and our conservation officers, which is great because they're not paying customers. They're not going to pay for the windmill. They're just going to try and make somebody else do it. So can we have some stuff on the site there that raises money to pay to keep the windmill, please? And I'm very much in favour of this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Waldron. Councillor Mildmay White, please.
Thank you, Chairman. And I do appreciate all the work the officers put into this, because it is a tricky situation, but it is a balance. And I'm certainly in favour of the less than, what do we call it? Less than...
substantial harm.
Substantial harm, exactly. What I am interested in, just quickly, is because it's a temporary structure and it will be taken down during the winter, if we'd given a 3-year conditional agreement, that could then become permanent. But if it's only a temporary structure and it's removed every winter, there's no chance of it ever becoming permanent, is there?
A good question, and officers will come back on that. Now, look, I'm anxious that we don't have another round of members' questions unless there's anything really burning. So when officers unless something comes out of the officers' responses, then could I just let you know I'm going to go straight into the vote. Thank you. Okay.
Just firstly, before we sort of pick up on those questions, I just wanted to go back to your proposal, Councillor London, in relation to a couple of points. I just want to explore those with you because they have quite specific wordings in terms of what they mean. So there's two things. You highlighted the Historic England not objecting in principle. You flagged the less than substantial harm, which then obviously triggers that balancing act. Then you went on to identify two things in the NPPF, one of those relating to the optimal viable use and one of them better revealing the asset. They both have quite specific meanings in terms of how they're applied in policy. So optimal viable use would normally relate to when you're looking at a listed building and what the optimal viable use for that building might be. This is slightly different because this is a development that's proposed in the setting. Just putting that to one side for a moment, the other point you raised in relation to better revealing, usually, again, that's about perhaps removing something that would allow you to see a heritage asset more clearly. So again, I don't think that's applicable in this case. However, noting the previous debate and the points you'd expressed before, I think perhaps where you were wanting to go, maybe just to reconsider in your proposal, it was about the weight you were giving to the benefits. So when you talk about better revealing, I think you meant the increased awareness and bringing of people to the site, which is slightly different in terms of that wording in the NPPF. So I just refer that back to you. And the other thing, in terms of the optimal viable use, again, I don't think that's applicable, but I know that you had referenced the benefits and gave them a different weighting to officers in terms of the benefits economically, in terms of the business, both the business itself, but also for the owner of the windmill who was renting out that land. So I just wanted to clarify that with you in terms of whether you're happy with those points and allow you to reflect on it.
Is there anything from you, James?
I think there was just one last point about colour. Obviously, it's blue. It will be blue. That's the applicant set that out very clearly from now. It matches the company branding. Would changing that colour change the officer recommendation in this location? No. It's not just the colour, it's the siting of the structure itself. I think there's just one very final point, and I don't think there's much more to add after this, is about whether it becomes a permanent structure. In the appendix of list of conditions, there is a condition or 3, removal of structure, which has been purposely worded to kind of permit the structure and its use during the time stated, but also give a bit of leeway in the sense of when it's put up and when it's put down. So the specific wording is, so it must be dismantled and removed from the site outside of these time frames. So, and then by no later than the first half of November, and then erected no earlier than the second half of March. So it wouldn't be permanent in the sense that it would be there all the time. Condition 3 would capture that, but also with some modest leeway in terms of time to actually pack it up, put it away, rather than having to kind of pack it all up on the last day of the month, if that makes sense. But yeah, I hope that's answered the question.
Thank you very much indeed, James. And if it is approved by the committee, the conditions are in Appendix 2 of your risk assessment and your report. Right, straight to it then, members. Proposed by Councillor Thorndyke, this time for approval, and seconded by Councillor London, and which is contrary to the officer's recommendation or refusal. Can I please see a show of hands in favour of approval, please? Yeah, it's difficult one, yeah.
Okay, that appears to be unanimous. The motion is carried and the application is approved.
Okay, thank you, Claire. Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much, committee. Yeah, well. Yeah. Okay, we move on to the final agenda item, but clearly we've actually got the appeals updates to follow. The final agenda item is the proposal for Charndale in Stanton. James, again, is the presenting case officer. So, James, when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. Just going to make sure I've got everything here.
That's okay.
Yeah, so this application is for a proposed self-built dwelling and cart lodge at land to the east of Charndale, west even. The application holds an officer recommendation of approval, which is in line with the parish council's support. However, the application is located outside the defined housing settlement boundary of Stanton, and therefore represents a departure from both the adopted and emerging local plan, which therefore requires consideration at committee. As set out within the report, particularly under the planning history, this application, not this application specifically, but this site has been at Development Control Committee twice in the past. So in 2019, it was presented, both proposals for a single dwelling, I should say. So in 2019, it was presented to members with an officer recommendation of refusal. That was overturned and the application allowed. And then the second application in 2022 was recommended by officers and then simultaneously approved by members. And that decision in itself is an extant planning permission that could still be implemented. Moving on to this slide shows the site location plan and aerial view. So the plan on the right-hand side does show the settlement boundary of Stanton within a red line. So this is outside, albeit directly adjacent the settlement boundary. Looking at historic mapping, it appears that it might have historically formed part of an agricultural field, as I'm sure all sites do if you go back far enough. but informally incorporated into an extended guard of Chardale, there is an existing agricultural style building on the site. This slide contains the amended proposed block plan. I'll set out the amendments within the next slide, but this just gives you an idea of what the layout of the site is. So it's going to consist of a primary 2-storey pitched roof wing, which is described as barn style, and then a more subservient single-storey T-shaped protrusion. Just setting out the amendments really quickly. This application was originally submitted with a B&G biodiversity net gain assessment and a relevant metric, which would have required the purchase of kind of off-site provision credits, etc. It wasn't initially clear that this was a self-build dwelling, in that the applicant will in fact live in the dwelling afterwards, but we now have a completed self-build pro forma. The description's been amended and reconsultation to confirm this is a self-build dwelling, and it would therefore be exempt from biodiversity net gain, and the conditions for that would not apply. In respect of design, following a meeting with the agent, the dwelling was reduced in depth, quite fairly modest reductions, but from 13.4 metres to 12, and then a very slight reduction in height from 7.1 to 7. In addition, the height of the brick plinths was raised, which was completed by the agent. So these slides just sets out the amended elevations. Although the dwelling remains of a considerable scale, it does sit within quite a large plot. There is extant planning permission for a large dwelling at this site. The application is also fairly somewhat similar to the 2019 application, albeit quite different in terms of fenestration. There's a lot less even glazing. So in the view of officers, the design of this dwelling is otherwise unintrusive, has a balance of different materials, including weatherboarding and brickwork, which a condition will secure the actual specifications, colour, etc. or such. It's also set fairly far back or centrally within the plot, and there will be screening to almost every boundary of this site. Just moving on to the floor plan, it's just the amended floor plans, so it would be a 4-bedroom dwelling. These are the elevations floor plan of the proposed cart lodge. This has been previously approved at these very similar, if not identical, dimensions in a very similar location. It appears as a traditional, well-designed cart lodge, which officers are quite content will fit in with the rural character of the area. Although this visual technically reflects the now superseded design, it does provide quite a helpful visual aid in terms of exactly what is proposed. You can consider therefore the scale of the dwelling, and then this kind of T-shaped protrusion here, the cart lodge, and then you can see this existing building here, and also the existing vehicular access, and also quite helpfully the boundary treatments, particularly to the front of this site and to the western side or eastern side. Moving swiftly on to the site visit pictures. There are 5 slides with pictures. So this is the first, which is the view looking along Char Road. This is the next photograph showing the dwelling almost directly opposite the site, which I believe is called Sky View, which is quite a modern, high quality building, which I believe formerly replaced a bungalow. This is the view from Char Road again, looking at the existing vehicular access here. And then this is just a photograph taken even further back, just to give you a bit of an idea of the landscaping along this boundary. In retrospect, I don't think my report at paragraph 9 quite appropriately reflected that this is actually quite a very well built up boundary here, so it will be quite well screened from the otherwise open agricultural field to the side. Hopefully the video loads, but this is just a video taken from the access turning round. Hopefully there's no sound. So that's the access. And then we're turning round to look at the Skyview property opposite the road. Spinning back round. So that's the video. Moving quickly on again to consultee comments. We have no objections from ecology, place services, no objections from highways. The parish are in support. There's no concerns in terms of contamination. There was one representation received from the property opposite that I've shown in the pictures, but they neither object or directly support the application. They just made some general comments and suggested recommendations and improvements or general considerations to the design. Moving on to the officer conclusion. As set out quite clearly within the report, this does not comply technically with the adopted or emerging local plan in respect of spatial strategy for housing because it is within the countryside, but there is a very clear material consideration here that otherwise indicates otherwise, that these legitimate fallback positions, particularly in the form of an extant planning permission for a dwelling that could still be constructed if this application was refused, for example, allows us as officers to recommend approval. In addition, there are social and economic benefits arising from construction and occupation of a self-build dwelling, which, as discussed earlier within a different presentation, the council does not currently have a 5-year housing land supply for a short window. So for these reasons, the application is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions that are attached within the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, James. Right, as a courtesy, Councillor Thorndyke, but you have pressed your button anyway as ward member, but as a committee member, over to you, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Harking back to the 19 application, which was recommended for refusal, we had the unsustainable location and all the rest of it. We had a site visit on that. And on that occasion, I walked from home up to the site on a pavement all the way because the papers specifically said there was no pavement to the village, and there was. Round the corner, you got one of the best shops in the area, never mind Stanton, that does sells just about anything. No reason why it shouldn't be approved. And this time, coming back, we've got a smaller property. It's moved slightly, okay, fine. But nothing has gone against it. So for the third time today, Mr. Chairman, I will move approval.
I'm very pleased you made the committee meeting, Councillor Thorndyke. A seconder, please. I'm going to go to Councillor Waldron. He was just Councillor Waldron, please.
Yeah, I remember the said site visit, and I seem to remember there's something to do with lorries up the lane, but I think that's not relevant, and I'm very pleased that the piece of land's finally going to be used. And on that basis, I've got to go with the officer.
Thank you, Councillor Waldron. Councillor Bull, please.
Thank you, Chair. Really, I do support it, but just a couple of questions. How long will the builder have to live in it before he can sell it, as it's a self-build? And also, if it wasn't passed, the extant planning permission, would that have to be done on a self-build basis, or would that not be? And then I suppose this is hypothetical, sorry. But it would just be interesting to know.
Okay. Yes. Councillor Thorndyke, please.
Yeah, coming back very quickly, Chairman, is that not on a bus route now as well? I mean, we've got the haulage yard down the bottom that's been there for longer than I can remember.
Yeah.
That has caused no grief. That uses a little tiny country road. So, everybody works together. It's fine.
Thank you, Councillor Thorndyke. Okay. Let's hold the committee questions. Going back to officers.
Just before I go to James, to answer that other question, in respect of the self-build requirements, and I'm kicking myself because we had this conversation and I said I'd find out and I neglected to find out in the busyness of the week, there is a restriction because it is set out in the legislation in terms of it, and I will furnish you with that, but I don't want to do it incorrectly at this time. So I will, Councillor Bell, I promise I will look into that for you. And I'll refer to James on the other question regarding the previous permission and whether that was self-build.
No, the last permission, the extent one, was for, from memory, a single-storey property. The initial one in 2019 was two-storey. Neither ones were self-build, but simultaneously at the same time, B&G only became applicable last year. I think there was always the intention of the people who own Chardale who want to build this and then move into it. So it would still fall into that self-build category, and they've signed the self-build pro forma. But I think hopefully that answers the question.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. I'm not going to hesitate. It's been proposed by Councillor Thorndyke and seconded by Councillor Waldron for approval in line with the officer's recommendation of approval. Can I see a show of hands in favour, please?
And that is unanimous, and motion is carried and the application approved.
Thank you, Claire. Meeting closed, and now we move into the appeals update.